Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome to you all. And thank you for joining this special 68th Independence Celebration Conference organized by the Nigerian community in Ethiopia. This conference under the theme, Nigeria's Development Imperative for Today and Tomorrow, seeks to interrogate key political, social, and economic themes that define the Nigeria that we live in today, and how we can fashion a more inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous country that works for all citizens and the government alike going forward. We have an excellent keynote speaker joining us today, and a galaxy of stars of discussants who would be engaging the discussion for us. But before we do that, I would like to invite the president of the Nigerian community in Ethiopia, Mr. David Omozuafo, to please give us his welcome remarks. Mr. Omozuafo, please.
Hello, it's breaking from my end. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, honorables, ladies and gentlemen. We want to honorably welcome you, Honorable Abike Dabiri. She's not here yet, but she'll be joining us later. Ambassador Richards Adejola, who heads the Nigeria Embassy in Ethiopia, Ambassador Hadiza Mustafa, who will be one of the discussants today, Professor Adebayo Lukoshi, Hidayat Hassan, Miriam Bukar, and many others who have connected. I feel I have a sense of pride and honor to be welcoming you on behalf of the Nigerian community in Ethiopia. We call it NICE. We're all very nice people in Ethiopia. So in case what you have where you are is not nice, please come to Ethiopia. We are nice there. I know if not for COVID, today we'll be having a very big party in Addis. But COVID has scattered people and we are not able to have the kind of gathering that we're used to, where we can eat and interact. But again, thanks to COVID, that we don't have excuse not to be available in the comfort of your room, in the comfort of your car, in the comfort of your office, you can actually participate. So we're also happy that we have that opportunity to have everyone to participate today. We are honored that you could take your time. Today is Saturday. People are free to do whatever they want, but because of your interest in the affairs of our country, our dear country, Nigeria, you have spared your weekend to take part in the discussion, to critically look at the progress that we have made and what more we need to do to make Nigeria the country of our dream, because no one is going to do that for us if not ourselves. Critical reflection is needed. It must be to assess the progress that we have made, the challenges that we have encountered, the journey that is left to be undertaken, what amount of water or food or bread that we need to take along, and where this journey will take us. I mean, how else can we benefit from the huge pool of experts, professionals that we have from our universities, from all over the world? We boast of huge pool of that. If we don't engage in critical thinking, in analytical assessment of the journey of Nigeria, how can we benefit from the many professionals we have around the world? So this is what we want to look at today, to hear from you where we are, the progress that we have made, the challenges we have surmounted and the challenges yet to be surmounted, and the lessons that we need to take to get to the Nigeria of our dream. But the question is, what is the Nigeria of our dream? What is the Nigeria in place, the indicators for getting there? So this is what this conference is seeking to achieve. And who else is better placed than the honorable men and gentlemen that have accepted to join this discussion today? Professor Lukoshi, Ambassador Adiza, Dr. Sam Amadi, Hidayat Hassan, Miriam, who will be giving us her own version of presentation in the form of poem, and so many others, all of you here present, to help think through the kind of country we should be having. And you're aware that recently the president set up Nigeria Agenda 2030. In the next 30 years, where do we wish to see our country? This is going to be a contribution to that conversation, to contribute to the setting of an agenda on the kind of Nigeria we wish to see in the next 30 years. So I want to call on you to be as critical as possible, to be as analytical as possible, but make sure that you propose solutions. We have had so many years of blame game, of asking questions, but let us be able to propose solution on how to get to where we wish to get to. It's not enough to just cry that we are not where we wish to see ourselves, but then we should also be concerned how we get there. And like we used to say, I can see my former boss has connected, Dr. Ojello, that if you are not sufficiently angry about the status quo, you cannot make progress. So let us demonstrate our positive anger and come up with positive results on how to make progress. On this note, again, I want to say you are welcome, all of you, and we invite you to have an open mind. I feel very free to interact in the discussion going forward. And so I want to welcome, I think I saw Dr. Amadi joining, Hidayat joining, who else, the discussant, to say a very big thank you for joining in the conversation today. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moswafo, for your very swift opening remarks. And before we move on to the welcome remarks by the Acting Ambassador of Nigeria to Ethiopia, I want to also join the President in welcoming all of you who have joined us on time. We already have about 20 people on the call with us. We're expecting quite a lot more. We hope that as the conversation, of course, advances, others would join us in the exchange. We welcome very specially all our speakers who have already joined, as well as very prominent Nigerians who have one time spent time here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with us, and those who have also moved on to other duty stations or countries and have also tuned in today to join this conversation. We welcome you all. Thank you very much. And at this point, may I invite His Excellency Ambassador Richard Adejola, the Acting Ambassador of Nigeria to Ethiopia, to give us his welcome remarks. Ambassador Adejola, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. But let me quickly make a slight correction. I'm not the ambassador to Ethiopia. I'm what we here call Chargé d'Affaires. In the absence of an ambassador, whoever is managing the mission as a head is known as Chargé d'Affaires. So we don't have an ambassador yet, but surely he or she is on the way. So let me, having said that, let me quickly express appreciation and a very huge delight. As the president said, our nice president here, it's nice is truly nice. And of course, for whatever is worth, he did say that ordinarily we should have been having a party and then small talk and even reflections. But for the fact that time is not auspicious and we all getting to know more about what the world is going through now. Nevertheless, it's heartwarming to welcome everyone. Indeed, my own, my assignment is very simple, to present to you a very big and huge welcome on behalf of the Nigerian mission in Addis Ababa. I always believe that this very mission is unique in that it is the home to everyone, all comers. We have all manners of professionals here in Addis Ababa, be it at the AU or UNECA. And indeed, I should also like to extend appreciation to our discussants today, from Professor Olukoshi, and to my boss, Ambassador Hadiza Mustafa. Indeed, we believe that today, going by what we have in the posters, I was going through the concept notes, and the posters are quite numerous, and they are actually appropriate, fit for situation, I should say. Nigeria's development imperatives for today and tomorrow. Of course, having in mind, I will be discussing issues as what should be the Nigeria of our dreams. Is there any sequential process for arriving at these dreams, and on and on. I believe it will be a good time for us to learn at the feet of the masters. But I would like to quickly share with us a couple of things I learned of recent. I of course, like everyone else, love to go through the internet, and I was going through profiles of country by country, and what caught my attention was that of Switzerland, I should say, Switzerland. I read that we've heard so much about Switzerland, what makes Switzerland tick. It's a small country with a huge reservoir of all you can think of, both in natural and human. Something came to me, something was very clear going through it, and that is what I'm going to read out. It says, herein lies perhaps one of the top reasons behind Swiss, and it reels it out as an ability to take raw products and turn them into something incredibly valuable, be they luxury chocolates, a beautiful diamond bracelet, or a complicated new drug. In other words, what lies behind Swiss wealth is entirely an ability to innovate, And that actually caught my attention, ability to innovate. And I believe all countries, small or big, should possess that ability to innovate. Perhaps that lies our avenue to wealth, our avenue to more creativity. Nigeria is already blessed. Nigeria is already blessed in terms of human and natural resources. But what we need to do with those would now be the ability to innovate, and that innovation to lead us to where you and I want, the Nigeria of our dreams. It is with this, I also would like to again welcome all of us, and then hope that truly, as the president said, we will not only ask those questions, we try and profile certain solutions. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Adejola, and thank you for the clarification. Ambassador Adejola is the Charge Affairs of the Nigerian Embassy here in Ethiopia. We also have the chair of the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, Mrs. Abike Dabiri, stated on the agenda. She will be joining us slightly late, but she's shared with us a message from NICOM, and we will be sharing that message with you all right about now. Please stay with us.
Dear Nigerians in the diaspora, there's wishing also a very happy independence, Nigeria at 60. Yes, at 60, when they say we're not where we should be as a nation, but we're moving on gradually, progressively. We're moving on with the president who's building a foundation that hopefully will not be broken or shaken. In the next 60 years, what is the role of the Nigerian in the diaspora to the progress and development of our dear country, Nigeria? With the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, an agency in place specifically for the Nigerian diaspora, we have no more excuses. As we move on, are there challenges? Oh, absolutely yes. But nobody can do it but ourselves as Nigerians. So I appeal to you all, Nigerians at home and Nigerians in the diaspora, to let us work together to build this great country of ours. As Mother Teresa once said, let's throw our pebbles in the river and create ripples. Throw your own pebble in the river and create a possible ripple. Nigeria needs you, and you need Nigeria too. It's a symbiotic relationship. Let's work together, my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, to build this beautiful, great country of ours. Happy independence anniversary. Happy 60 years to our dear country.
All right, thank you very much to Honorable Abike Dabiri for the one message. We would also be inviting her to make input in the conversation when she joins the call. Right about now, we will be moving on to the keynotes message for today, the keynote speech for today. As advertised, Professor Adebayo Lukoshi has joined us. He is currently the Regional Director for Africa and West Asia at the International IDEA, based here in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa here in Ethiopia. Professor Adebayo Lukoshi has more than 35 years experience in various intergovernmental and even civil society and the academia. He's one of the very profound speakers when it comes to issues around political economy, politics, and the issue of development in Africa. We are very proud to have Professor Olukoshi join us today. And I would like to invite Professor Adebayo Olukoshi to please take the floor. Professor Olukoshi, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Ibrahim. Let me also start off by expressing profound association to the entire leadership of NICE, including our president, David Omozwafo, who has not only taken a frontline role in helping to revive the network and association of Nigerians in Ethiopia, and we are quite a sizable lot coming from all parts of the country, but also to give substance and content to the activities of NICE. I would like to congratulate you and your team for that. I think it's also appropriate to extend warm greetings to the Chargé d'Affaires at the Nigerian Embassy. Look forward to your full ambassadorial status in the very near future. But thank you also for your support to NICE and for the words of welcome which you have extended to us as the representative of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces in the Republic of Ethiopia. May I also extend greetings to all participants, including the panelists. Hadiza Mustafa is the boss of all of us, so acting ambassador is not only your boss, it's the boss of all of us. All of us Nigerians in Addis Ababa. Ambassador Hadiza Mustafa, Idayat, Hassan, Director of CDD, and Sam Amadi from the University of Abuja. Together with all of the other colleagues and participants, I recognize most of you. Thank you, Ozonia, for joining us all the way from Eastern Europe, Bishek, for this conversation. Chair, you prepared a concept note for this conversation, which I have read and reread. several times as I try to formulate some reflections to share in the 30 minutes allotted to me. And in the concept notes, you raised a set of 6 questions, which you hoped we will focus our attention on for much of the rest of the day. What is the Nigeria of our dream? Is there a sequential process for arriving there? What are the short, medium, and long-term solutions to the challenges that will confront? What lessons have we learned in the past 60 years? What can we learn from history for a better tomorrow? And how can we stimulate the yes, we can spirit? I think those questions are appropriate. In a sense, also, all of them interconnected. But perhaps from my point of view, the best way I thought I would approach the questions was to focus particularly on the 5th one of them, which is what can we learn from history? And to do this from a comparative perspective. In large part because I think we can all very quickly agree on what the Nigeria of our dream is or should be. Very few will disagree that we want a stable, peaceful, forward-looking country, which we can all call home. And we can fill in the details of what that means, whether it's an industrial economy, a powerful trading nation, a leader in the Committee of Nations, and so on and forth. There, I think there won't be too much disagreement on what kind of Nigeria of our dream we would want to see. And indeed, for 60 years, we have been dreaming of such a country. Is there a sequential process of arriving there? There is actually no shortage of literature, including reflections which have been written by some of the colleagues who are participating in this conversation today on what one might call the prerequisites for a developmental transformation, without being tautological, of a developmental transformation for our country, what the prerequisites would be. And those who have written have done so as part of a wealth of scholarly output that has spanned the entire duration of our independence on what we need to do, from Billy Dudley and the Ibadan School, all the way through to Claude Ake, writing from out of the University of Port Harcourt when he returned to Nigeria, or Okudi Bannoli and his award-winning book on ethnic politics in Africa and how to manage diversity, to the late Yusuf Bala Usman and the Zaria School of Radical Political Economists, of which I was myself a product, who spent an entire period of time looking at what it meant to build a nation and a state in a framework of diversity. So there is no shortage there. And I think perhaps there also we can very quickly identify some of the key pillars that are necessary to put in place in order to achieve the Nigeria of our dream. What lessons have we learned from the last 60 years, except perhaps for those of us who might be politicians and whom we often accuse as Nigerians of learning nothing and forgetting nothing from history. I believe that there are many lessons which we have taken forward in the history of our country and actually even attempted to relate to in practice from the kinds of governance shifts that have occurred. And I deliberately use the word shifts as opposed to transformation. Exercises in calibration and recalibration designed to achieve stability, even if for a short period of time, being part of the attempt to respond to the lessons of history of 60 years of attempting to build a nation and a state. Where I think perhaps we could usefully invest energy, and I propose to focus attention, is what history teaches us in general about the making and unmaking of nations, what makes nations great, at what point, where is the turning point that actually makes it possible for nations to emerge into greatness, both for the sake of their own citizens and onto the world stage. And we have seen this happen over time in history, not just in terms of the early developers, the first developers, say the United Kingdom of Great Britain, where the first industrial revolution took place, but also particularly, I would say, from the experience of late developers, which have had to put in place a set of measures internally in order to be able both to catch up and even overtake the early developers in the history of the world, and therefore stamp their presence on the sands of time. And here I think there's a lot of lesson which we can draw from their experience in order to speak to ourselves, and to do so with the kind of frankness and honesty which President of NICE, you have called for in the concept note that you circulated to us, and also in your statement where you said we needed to speak to ourselves with openness and honesty within a positive spirit of building a better nation. My starting point, therefore, from the lessons of history on a comparative global scale will be, first and foremost, perhaps sounding banal, but nevertheless, I think from my point of view, useful to remind ourselves that we are the makers of our own history and the shapers of our destiny. Nobody is going to help us. We either make Nigeria work, or we watch Nigeria go down the drain. I mean, it's really a straightforward choice. No great country in the world has emerged on the basis of the charity or the altruism of others. Citizens and leaders in all experience of history have found moments where they have exercised agency and seized opportunities in order to make a great leap for themselves and for the people of their countries. So something which we also say often in Nigeria, our current president is famous for having said in his military days in 1984, when he was announced as our military head of state, that we have no other country to call ours except this Nigeria, which I'll come back to later on in the course of my presentation. But I think also just basically to say that this is not an issue that is alien to our conversations in the country. What we have done with it is a different matter. And I want to suggest that sometimes we have acted in ways and in a manner as though the world owes us a living, as if the world owes us a living. And we need to actually look ourselves in the mirror and remember that the world does not owe Nigeria a living, and the world has never owed any people a living. Indeed, if we choose the path of self-destruction and of underperforming persistently, as we have done over the last 60 years, the world will be happy to lend us a hand to underperform. If we choose a path of not getting our act together, the world will have no difficulty helping us to stay in our state of underdevelopment. And I think this is not an issue, again, which should be shocking to anybody. We just need to look at examples around us on the African continent. Take the DRC, Congo, almost 60 years of permanent crisis, permanent. And it is not just a question of external powers, extra African powers, meddling and messing up the country repeatedly, but also even of African neighbors of the DRC, now taking advantage of its situation of internal disarray and weakness in order to help it to stay completely disarrayed and weak to their own benefit, to their own advantage, including extracting its resources to develop themselves, fellow African countries. So nobody has ever owed anybody a living in the history of humankind. And leave all the diplomatic niceties aside. Unfortunately, we have seasoned diplomats amongst us this morning. Leave all the diplomatic niceties apart. All of the platitudes that are often addressed to us aside. The greatest African nation, the biggest Black civilization on earth, things that sometimes flatter and make us feel a bit swollen-headed, but which in fact, in the context of what those countries that put those platitudes in our way are prepared to do in order to support us, it becomes very clear that there's a gulf between rhetoric and between action. And sometimes rhetoric which is deliberately developed to flatter in order precisely to take advantage of us. And examples proliferate in our experience of development and politics, where in fact we see that in the geopolitical calculation of many countries, and let us not forget to remind ourselves that 200 million people today, by 2050, which is 30 years from now, where our Vision 2050 has been pitched, Nigeria will be talking of close to 400 million or so, according to the statistics of the United Nations, and well on its way to becoming the third most populous country in the world if it stays together as one country. Now, 450 million Nigerians, for some people, is a threat. Let's not make any mistake about it. It may sound like good news to us. For some people in Africa and outside of Africa especially, it is a threat. And from the point of view of their own geopolitical calculations, they may have an interest in actually keeping Nigeria hobbled rather than helping Nigeria to transform. Again, I say I make a distinction between diplomatic platitudes and the kinds of realities which we have to confront on a day-to-day basis, including sabotage. And if we have any experience to draw on of a concrete and direct nature which we all have access to, it is simply to go back to the archives of the Nigerian Civil War and the role which was taken by some of the geopolitical powers, including France, which is the undefined 16th or 17th member of ECOWAS, very actively meddling, understanding that the power of France and the influence of France on a global scale is dependent on its capacity, quote unquote, to manage Nigeria effectively and the Nigerian influence effectively. So the world does not owe us a living. I've overstated this point, but perhaps it was necessary to do so. Sometimes within Nigeria itself, we also sometimes give the impression that maybe we are too big to make a success of. Sometimes out of frustration, I guess. Some compatriots take a good look at us and perhaps look at what a country like Singapore has made of itself a city-state, or even other recent examples like Dubai and the successes they have registered. And I've read commentators, knowledgeable and otherwise educated commentators in our newspapers, who sometimes suggest that maybe our problem is that we are too big. And I want to suggest that in fact, the problems of Nigeria have little to do with our size and more to do with other factors that I hope to come back to. Particularly, I would argue, centrally, the factor of domestic leadership and the leading of our developmental agenda. But let me come back to that later. No country, in my view, is either too big or too small to make a success of itself. Historically and contemporaneously, no country is too big or too small to make a success of itself. The issue is less of size. The problem lies elsewhere, and we need to dig in order to find out what exactly those problems are. An associated issue which also often comes out of commentaries about our Nigerian situation and the persistent underperformance of our potentiality when measured against the natural resources and human resources which we have, is the suggestion that perhaps we are too diverse. too many, 300 and something ethnic groups and still counting. It's just too diverse to manage. And I want to argue again, in the interest of time, I will not develop this too far, that no country is too diverse or too homogeneous to make a success of. In fact, the most successful nations in the history of the world, whether they be empires or nation states, have been underpinned by a variety of diversities, including ethnic and religious, regional diversities. Diversity, in fact, can be demonstrated to be an asset in the making of great nations, as opposed to being a liability for the making of great nations. And there is nothing anyway in history that suggests to us that homogeneity, sui generis, is itself an automatic ticket to success in the process of constructing the nation and the state, or achieving what I call developmental transformation. We don't need to look too far. Somalia, just next to us in Ethiopia, we don't need to look too far to realize that homogeneity has never been a key to success, just as diversity is not a one-way road to failure. Managing our diversity successfully is therefore an important part of the challenge of leadership, to which I hope to return later. Still looking at what some of our commentators at home have suggested in writing, and as we began to approach the the Diamond Jubilee of our independence, the 60th anniversary of our independence, it was not difficult at all to pick up a number of critical commentary, a lot of them, I believe, patriotic and well-meaning, but which deserve also to be put in context in order for us not to go around in circles. And here there's reference which has been made to an absence of policy and institutional consistency and continuity. And there is actually, from the point of view of development theory, something to be said for policy and institutional continuity in the making of nations. But I also want to suggest that this particular element of our failing can in fact be understood, just like corruption, as being both cause and consequence, both cause and effect. And so to that extent, does not embody all of the explanation which we need. Indeed, absence of policy and of institutional continuity, like corruption, can be understood as a dependent variable, as a variable which is in fact a byproduct of something else which has been missing in our history and which would need to be addressed. I've read commentaries also about the persistence of an old and unyielding generation, that class of 1960 that has just refused to leave the scene and to leave the stage, for a younger generation of Nigerians to take over. Again, maybe there is something to it. Every country does deserve to be able to put in place a proper system of leadership succession of the type that will enable its leadership to be as up-to-date and as modern as modernity itself. And yes, we have reason to be embarrassed for African countries whose leaders are in their 80s and 90s, sitting alongside colleagues from Austria, from France, from New Zealand, from Finland, and other parts of the world who are young enough to be their grandchildren. Still, I would argue that the issue of stability, of continuity, of success of a nation is not strictly defined in generational boundary terms, but rather actually an intermingling of generational experiences and ideas of the type which can then be harnessed effectively to achieve the transformation which is desired, or to sustain the transformation which has been achieved. There is no generation which by definition is in a certain sense unprogressive from the outset. It is in failing to fulfill a mission or a destiny that a generation can actually become a liability to the progress of a country. The reality of most countries in the world, and the successful ones amongst them, is that the old and the new and the not so new often interface and intermingle in an effective way as to be able to propel society in its forward march. I continue, therefore, with discounting all of the other explanations which I have read, which include the curse of history, as some commentators have referred to it. Nigeria suffering from a curse of history because, in a certain sense, 1914, the amalgamation of January 1914 was an accident of history with which we have come to live. Actually, considering the weight of some of the commentators who have repeated this particular claim, I've spent a bit of time going back, looking at the writings of scholars, Barry Anderson, Teda Skocpol, and others on the making of nations and the rise and fall of nations around the world. And I want to again suggest that actually most countries are, quote unquote, an accident of history. Most countries emanate out of a series of accidents of history. Few are the countries in the world that can be defined as being the product of a deliberate exercise of engineering. And where that deliberate exercise of engineering was indeed attempted as a way of bringing to an end the wars, the internecine wars that racked Europe leading up to the Westphalia Treaty. Actually, the outcome of the Westphalia exercise was itself as incomplete as it was in fact divisive of a nation building and state building project. Because let us remember that Westphalia was an attempt actually to define national territorial boundaries on the basis of some degree of ethnic contiguity in Europe. That exercise failed signally because ethnicities had in fact transcended boundaries already in historical Europe. And the consequence was that we had a number of stateless people coming out of the Westphalia exercise and an attempt in the new territorial boundaries that were defined as the new nation states of Europe, comprising of multi-ethnicities in which a hegemonic ethnic group attempted to subdue others and laying the seeds, therefore, for some of the instability and the failings that produced both the First World War and the Second World War that were in fact essentially European ethnic wars. So the process of nation building and the process of state building are exercises in deliberate visioning. They are exercises in deliberate visioning which call for a kind of leadership acumen that is integral to the successes that we have seen of some of the most powerful nations on earth. And there we can actually look across to the United States of America as an example of both an accident of history and of a potpourri of diversities of the kind which has produced one of the most powerful civilizations in recent history. So, what does this all come down to? I can go on. I've talked about the issue of corruption, and I will not dwell too much on it. Corruption as a problem in Nigeria is indisputable, but corruption is also in many ways cause and consequence. Nigeria is not the only corrupt country in the world. That is not an excuse for corruption in Nigeria. I do not, in fact, in any way want to excuse corruption in Nigeria. It has gotten out of hand, and it has become a positive threat both to national survival and security, given the scale on which it is going on at all levels of society and politics and the economy. Nevertheless, it's also important to understand that the kind of corruption that takes place, if we agree that corruption is not the sole property of Nigeria, is not the sole defining feature of the Nigerian political economy, we must then ask ourselves the question as to why the kind of corruption that takes place in Nigeria has become so detrimental to the future and well-being of the country. And here, I think there's a lot that can be said about the kind of corruption that takes place as to make it both cause and consequence, and to tie it to my point about the central place of leadership, the central place of leadership in a developmental transformation. Mr. Chairman, you know, we have never been short of initiatives in Nigeria. We have never been short of agendas in Nigeria. We have never been short of dialogues in Nigeria. We have never been short of constitutional conferences. In a certain sense, we've probably even had an excess of all of those in our 60-year journey, including the constitutional conferences that ushered us towards independence in the period after the Second World War to self-government and ultimately to the establishment of the Federal Republic. Post-independence, we've also had a series of all of those initiatives. And there's a sense in which, of course, they respond to a demand which deserves to be answered, of dysfunction in the system, of a system needing to be calibrated, of discontent, particularly from those who feel marginalized and excluded, and therefore have a case to be made for restructuring of the polity or of a recalibration of social and economic policy in order to cater for the underprivileged and the working poor amongst us. All of those have happened in our context. And I want to suggest that unless we deal with the leadership question, Agenda 2050 will suffer the same fate as Vision 2020, as Vision 2020 also suffered a similar fate as everything else that preceded it. When I talk about the centrality of leadership, I, of course, effectively also go back to some of the last reflections that the late Chinua Achebe shared with us as a Nigerian patriot, particularly in his book, The Anthills of the Savannah, where he pointedly, I think maybe even angrily, made it clear, and I think many can relate to it, that the problem of Nigeria, to paraphrase him, was just pure and simple, a problem of a failure of leadership. But we do need to unpack this notion of a failure of leadership, of a leadership deficit or a leadership crisis that has repeatedly bedeviled us in Nigeria, as to make us both underperform our potentiality, but also suffer all of those issues that have repeatedly been used to explain why a Nigeria project may be overripe for being dismantled or discontinued. Number one, and again, we don't talk too much or sufficiently or honestly about it, is that leadership as a concept and as policy and practice cannot make sense if you do not have a cohort of elites who actually, in the first instance, believe in a national territorial space, in a polity. If we do not believe in Nigeria to start with, if we do not have a leadership elite that believes in the country and actually is convinced about the country, it is going to be a continuous exercise in running around in circles. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on this occasion of our 60th anniversary, I want us to challenge ourselves and ask whether, in all honesty, from what we know of all of the information available to us, whether we have had an elite over time that has actually truly believed in Project Nigeria. and very few. We've seen glimpses of what is possible where you have a leadership elite at the helm of our country that actually does believe in Nigeria. We have seen glimpses of that, and I can cite examples. But what is worrisome, and when you take the issue of corruption, for example, is the fact also that we have had a leadership elite that wholesale dismantles the economy of a country, empties the treasury of a ministry or a parastatal, and takes the money abroad to Switzerland, to Dubai, to Mauritius, to offshore havens, to a point where there is a significant proportion of the national wealth illicitly taken out by an elite. If you believe in the country, and that's the difference between corruption in Nigeria and corruption, say, in Malaysia, or corruption in Singapore, or corruption in the United States, is the fact that it takes place in the context of a belief in the country, in those countries. And we distinguished ourselves with an elite which basically sees itself as being in the typical psychology of a colonial governor general, as being a successor to a colonial governor general, not sufficiently decolonizing its mentality and understanding that the Nigeria which it inherited from the departing British is a Nigeria that is home and to which it owes a duty to develop and invest as home. As to be able, for example, to say that if you need to treat yourself, you would be able to set up the best possible reference hospital to do so in your country. Or that you need to send children to school, you will develop those elite institutions like Cambridge and Oxford in order to be able to do exactly the same thing. And if Cambridge and Oxford sounds like too familiar, you do what the Japanese did. You will develop institutions of a similar kind, like Tokyo University or Keio University, in which you send your children and the most talented members, children of citizens, in order to assure the continuity of that country which you believe in. I cannot overemphasize this point enough. We take it for granted that the fact that we all hold the same green passport of one kind or the other means that we are all Nigerians. And I want to challenge that fact today and suggest that actually the extent to which we are individually invested and immersed in the Nigerian world must be questioned and interrogated in order for us to begin to understand the extent of our Nigerianness and our belief in the country. Something has to be deeper than simply being able to sing an anthem or travel on a national passport. In any case, a good proportion of our elites are holders of multiple passports, and people who are offering passports, second or third passports for Caribbean and other offshore locations have recently established an office in Abuja in order to net in more elites and give them the exit opportunity to be able to leave the country, which they lead, but in which they actually do not necessarily believe. If you want to believe in your country, you must also begin by believing in yourself. The concept note talks about that Nigerian spirit, that can do and will do spirit. And that can do and will do spirit can only itself establish itself as a mainstream part of our national culture only when there is a leadership that not only believes in Nigerians and believes in our capacity as a people to be the authors and the architects of our destiny, and to be able to make our mistakes and self-correct in the process, as to invest sufficiently, therefore, in the idea of a Nigerian citizenship. Leadership in the world, all over the world, that has played a transformational role has not only been leadership that has been driven on the basis of a belief in the polity, and out of which belief the notion of conviction politics has developed. Conviction basically being that the leadership is fully immersed and invested in that polity, in the way a typical UK politician or French politician or Japanese politician will be fully immersed and invested in their country. Something which I think several scholars, people like George Obiozo, even Kayode Fayemi, governor of Ekiti, have called Project Nigeria or Nigeria Incorporated as an organizing principle around which that belief in country and belief in self can be constructed. A third element, which I think for me probably is the most important part of the notion of leadership that we need to unpack, Mr. Chairman. I'm not even using the notion of transformational leadership here because I think it's in a certain sense assumes that we all have a shared understanding of what we mean by transformational leadership, but not necessarily unpacking it in order to address some of these issues. But here I think the third element for me is what I call in the history of nations around the world, the discovery by the elite, by the leadership elite, of a sense of an historic sense of dignity. Dignity. So much so that I can actually argue that no country, no nation, no people in the world, in all of the history of the world, have ever emerged into themselves and onto the world stage as key and effective players, both serving their citizens and being reckoned with on a global scale without having a leadership that is immersed in a sense of self-dignity. And colleagues, I want to suggest that this is one thing which has eluded us for a very long time. And dignity is not about our capacity to dress flamboyantly and to look good. It is simply that basic sense of self-respect, of a self-respect that made it possible for a Chinese leadership long before the communist revolution, having been humiliated in the Opium War by an ascendant British Empire, insistent on selling opium to the people of China, and the Chinese leadership saying opium is killing our people, we need to stop this trade. And for stopping that trade, British, who ruled the high seas at the time, declared war on China and defeated the Chinese. And the Chinese leadership and elite learning from that history and saying, never again shall we be humiliated by any people in the world. And if it will take us 200 years to achieve what it takes to have that self-dignity, that self-respect, that self-assuredness, so be it, we shall work towards it. The Chinese Communist Revolution of 1949 was as much a revolution about social questions as it was about claiming the history of China and setting it on a path of dignity. Much in the same way as the Japanese, in the context of all of their efforts to achieve developmental transformation, looking at the experiences around them, the industrial revolution that had taken place in Europe, led by the United Kingdom, and the transformation that was beginning to unfold in the United States as it achieved its independence subsequently. And all of these have fed into the making of a sense of dignity for the Japanese. The Meiji Restoration that took place and set Japan on the path of modernization, of an aggressive modernization, was as much about claiming dignity for the people of Japan as it was about anything else. And all of the energies of the country, including the theft of technology from Europe and the United States, the sending of children to schools in Ivy League institutions just as the Chinese were to do later in the 20th and 21st centuries, and all of the shifts that took place were defined in the context of a complete commitment to a national objective of establishing themselves as a dignified people, a self-reliant people, a self-respecting people who shall not be humiliated again by any power in the world. Out of dignity, therefore, began a process also of the definition of the rules of the game. You cannot have an elite that does not conform to any rules of the game. And I challenge us, what are the rules of the game by which we comply in Nigeria? Is the rule of law just an abstract concept, or is it one that was actually historically hewed out of struggles to establish that sense of dignity by a leadership group? Of dignity that says that here are the lines that we must not cross collectively as a people. We are free to do and undo as we wish, because as an elite we have the power, but there are certain red lines we must not cross. The bargain in the making of South Korea into a modern industrial nation at the forefront of innovation began when the leadership of the country made up its mind that it would not go communist like the rest of the world, and it fought to not go communist like North Korea, but there would be rules of the game by which the elite that would be supported to become the industrial titans that we hear about today, the rules by which they must abide. And those rules were enforced. You may have read about the jailing of the heir to the Samsung dynasty, who was taken to jail for spending part of the corporate income on buying a yacht, a luxury yacht. It was widely reported. And we see this being enforced. It is a private company, it's a private conglomerate, but it was one which was set up as part of a transformation agenda in which it was made clear that certain rules had to be abided with. And those rules were uniformly enforced no matter who. And fast forward to our context in Nigeria, and you begin to see that the issue of corruption is actually a self-inflicted problem on ourselves. Mr. President, David Omozoa is accused of embezzling. And a section of Nigerians would immediately say, well, just leave him alone, because when Ibrahim Sanusi before him was embezzling, we didn't hear your voice. And then when Hadiza Mustafa comes and then does her own embezzling, we say, well, it's their time, it's their turn. Let them do as they like. So that effectively, we have turned Nigeria into a casino in which a game of musical chairs is enacted by an elite which is as lawless as it is avaricious and selfish. How can you get transformation out of it? No matter how many platitudes you mouth, you are never going to be able to get any positive benefits for the collectivity out of that system of governance. And what is worrisome about our context is that this avaricious and selfish elite that functions on the basis of a certain fundamental lawlessness has also taken over the helm to such an extent that it would take a determined group of reformers to dislodge them from the levels of power that they have come to occupy and feel so comfortable in. So we do need, from all of this idea of a leadership and of a leadership dignity, the rules of the game by which all shall abide. If it is Adebayo Olukoshi that is corrupt and therefore breached the rules that have been agreed as part of a broad leadership consensus that is integral to the making of great nations, Adebayo Olukoshi must pay the price that is prescribed without any emotions, without any sentiments. And that would be the beginning of part of the march of transformation, which we yearn for so much. Nobody talks about rules of the game without talking about a vision of society. And again, I don't want us to understand vision here solely in terms of the kinds of exercises we go through every 5 years or every 10 years of vision this and vision that, or sectoral visions, but rather to understand vision as also an integral element of a shared consensus about where we want to be. So that when you had a young president, John F. Kennedy, trying to rally the American nation to the challenges of competition in the international system, trying to get the American nation to reassert its post-1945 leadership, and saying that we shall land a person on the moon as a promise. Remember, the Russians had launched Sputnik and had beaten America to the space race with the launching of Sputnik and the placement of Yuri Gagarin in space, and saying our vision, this presidency, will invest and mobilize. And when it happened, even for those of us who are not Americans, and I was a little boy growing up in Kaduna at the time, I remember the way in which the entire world was captivated by the fact that men were landed on the moon for the first time in the history of humankind. Vision is a multifaceted weapon of nation and state building, without which no elite can ever develop on a sustained basis or transform on a continual basis the story of a country into a story of success. Who speaks of vision also speaks of a bargain with the people. Zonia will remember that as far back as when we first met in Uppsala, Sweden, I'd already started talking about the central importance of the social contract between state and society. And the idea that what we need to do is also to, within the framework of our national vision, propose a bargain to Nigerians. Because as it is today, actually, we do not have a bargain to speak of. What is the bargain in being a Nigerian? What is in it for the ordinary person in Birnin Kebbi or in Enugu or in Abeokuta or elsewhere? What is the bargain? What is the elite offering to the people that will make them actually say that we don't want any other home than this Nigeria? For the average Swede or the average Norwegian, it was not magical. Remember, those were not rich countries. Or for the average Finn, it was not a matter of we have so much wealth. They didn't have much, but there was a bargain. And that bargain was very clearly defined into the making of the modern welfare state of the most advanced kind, which we know in the world today. So, bargain for the people in the making of a full citizenship is an integral part of the idea of leadership, which I submit to us today for our reflection. As I begin to wind down, I also want to talk about the importance within this framework of a consensus around political succession. And this addresses issues not just of individual or geopolitical or interregional, but also of intergenerational succession, as well as the kinds of gender balances, the central importance of gender equality and the empowerment of women within the framework of a leadership equation that will help us to achieve a sustained march forward. Finally, Chair, and I know I have really abused of your indulgence, but let me close on this note by saying that the beginning of a journey towards greatness for every nation in the world is when the people, represented by their leaders, are able to find what exactly comprises the pulse of the nation. The pulse of the nation, that thing that makes the nation tick, that thing that becomes, in a certain sense, the lodestone around which everything else can be constructed. It is what sometimes is called the spirit of the nation. And it is around that spirit of the nation that identity and belonging begin to be constructed. And I hope that in our journey over the next decades, years and decades, as an ardent believer in Project Nigeria, as somebody who is fully convinced that Nigeria is better off as a united country rather than a fragment or fragmented into many little bits. I hope that we will find that spirit, that lever that will enable us to be able to be at peace both within ourselves and with our neighbors. Thank you very much for your patience. And I also thank the listeners for the kind indulgence.
Thank you very much, Professor Adebayo Olukoshi, for that thought-provoking session. I mean, you've taken us on a journey, first looking at what are the very popular myths that a lot of people have put out as the reason why Nigeria is not working as we wish it to, and why some of these misconceptions are also not helping in getting a national consensus or the national awakening that is required in thoroughly debating and, of course, interrogating these issues. And you've then gone ahead to talk about how, at the end of the day, it is the agency of Nigeria in itself and of its people that is key to leading us to the greatness that we are destined for. And that diversity management in itself is at the core of some of the issues that we need to be looking at. And effective management of that diversity is one. I mean, I can't attempt to summarize that excellent presentation. The highlights, including those that we've tweeted publicly to others who are also following on our social media handles. I would like to call your attention, Professor Olukoshi and our other speakers, to the chat room, where we already have some of the questions queued there for you, so that when we begin to take questions, we can, of course, at a time, just go through them very quickly. Before I go on to the next caller, I will launch a poll now, and it is to sort of get a reflection of participants on this conference, how you think Nigeria has fared since independence. The poll is now launched. It's out there for you. You have a few minutes to, click on what your reflection is. Do you think we are doing well? Do you think that it's man no die, man no quench situation? Do you believe it go better? Or you think that future goes sweet? We would like to hear your view of how you think Nigeria has fared since the independence. And as I do that, I would like to invite our next discussant, Miriam Booker-Allen, will be joining us shortly. But before then, we would move on to our discussants. And of course, first on the list is Ambassador Hadiza Mustafa, who has been described on this call as our leader here in Addis Ababa, our boss, the senior boss here in Addis Ababa for all the Nigerians based in Ethiopia. But she is the advisor to the African Union Commission Chairperson on Peace and Security and Governance. And prior to that, she was one time the Nigerian ambassador to Cameroon. Ambassador Hadiza will be sharing our reflections on the conversation we've had so far and a few more that helps us chart the way forward to a future assured for all Nigerians. At this point, may I invite Her Excellency Ambassador Hadiza Mustafa to please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for the kind words. Let me acknowledge our president, even though he says he's a chargé, but he's our president, Ambassador Richard Adejola, my sister, Honorable Abike Dabiri, I don't know if she's joined already. And then, of course, my brother, Adebayo Olukoshi, Regional Director of IDEA in Africa and West Asia. And also my fellow discussants, my sister Adiyat Hassan and Dr. Sam Amadi, very good to see you. It's been a long time. And our amiable president of NICE in Ethiopia, brother David Omozua, and NICE executives. Fellow Nigerians and friends of Nigeria, even though I've looked through the chat room, I think we are all on our own, but I'm sure before we finish, we would have some of our friends join us. Let me start by really congratulating us for this 60th anniversary, and also to thank NICE for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. It is always a pleasure to listen to the brilliant insights of my brother Bayo on a number of, on all topics. Now this usually means that at the end of his speaking, you really do not have much to add. And this particular one, in fact, Bayo, this is the best I have ever seen you at, and congratulations. You really hit a lot of points for me, and three in particular that I really want to emphasize. There's nothing to add. First of all, there's nothing to add, but there are three key points that you have made that I think that we need to really emphasize. And number one, and is the last one you finished with, which is this issue of centrality of leadership. And we are very fortunate this year in marking our 60th anniversary, because this was marked, like Bayo says, with a lot of public debates and webinar reflections on this all-important topic. In fact, again, as the keynote speaker has said, one could say that the Nigerian question is so well articulated that we may now run the risk of overthinking it. Therefore, the starting point for me is exactly where you stopped. The bane of all our great ideas in the country is that we as a people, particularly the elites, think that it is the responsibility of someone else to deliver on the Nigeria of our collective dreams. And I think you made that point abundantly clear. So in addition, not walking the talk, and in the words of another of your friends, or perhaps a counterpart, Osman Bagaji, who spoke on one of the Independent Day webinars, he says one of the challenges confronting Nigeria is lack of elite consensus. And I think you brought that out very clearly. Therefore, it is imperative for Nigerian elites like you and I. You emphasize a lot on elite leaders, but I want to say that, like you and I, particularly since we are in the diaspora, that's actually my point, is to say that we need to work together in harmonious, patriotic manner instead of pulling in different directions. And you have made a very good explanation about some of the reasons why we're pulling, and a lot of things have been written also about some of the reasons why, for instance, we are pulling in different directions. We have each one of us have a duty and responsibility to work towards the realization of our country's great potentials. There's no one else that can do this for us, not even the government. The government cannot even do this for us if we are to leave the government to work alone. In any case, I mean, when you talk about government, who is the government? But we, the people. So I encourage us to continue to prioritize this soft issues in our conversations, especially those of us that have found ourselves in the diaspora. If Nigeria wishes to catch up with her peers, with whom we began nation building together at the same time, then definitely, if we also want to have some of these things that we always admire, you know, we admire infrastructure, services, schools, healthcare, advanced technologies that we see in Europe, America, Asia, and so on and so forth. We have to, as elites, be prepared to invest the same amount of positive energy, and I like to emphasize that, positive energy, hard work, and commitments invested by citizens of those countries. And I like the examples that you have given about dignity and about the history of Japanese greatness, about humiliation. And I think I'll touch on that on my next point, which is about migration. My second point is also closely related to this first one. And I want to illustrate this by sharing an unfortunate but true observation that is regularly made by non-Nigerians. And by the way, nice, I think I will suggest to you that the next conference we have should definitely, we should have speakers who are non-Nigerians. At 60, I think we should be bold enough to hear feedbacks from non-Nigerians. Now, this comment I said is unfortunate, but I think is true, is that you hear non-Nigerians say regularly that everyone loves Nigerians except Nigerians themselves. This to me demonstrates the imperative for urgently addressed the many internal fault lines that lend themselves to self-hate, blame game, and even calls for secession. The situation in both the country and outside the country today has so degenerated that we cannot even have national conversations without insulting each other or reading ethnic and negative connotations to them. We simply cannot continue this way and expect to move forward in the 21st century. And I think, Bayo, you made very, very, very good case on that. In whatever form we decide to tackle the Nigerian project, and thank you for bringing up my friend Kayode's thesis on the Nigerian project. So in whatever way we decide, it has to be done now. In fact, some people say that we have only the window of the next elections, but the organizers of this conference say we have an opportunity now to make things right in the upcoming Agenda 2050. Even though I read some sort of cynicism from you, Bayo, about visions and vision this, vision that. This is a discussion for another day. Now, as I said earlier, we are never short of good ideas. Recently, Professor Atahiru Jega wrote a widely shared article on restructuring of Nigeria. Now, in that article, he made some very bold statements. For instance, he says, who says we should continue to say that Nigeria's unity is not negotiable? I think that if you have not read that article, I suggest that you get it. But he made one recommendation that I strongly subscribe to, and that is that we have to have hard, honest national dialogue. I mean, I believe in this as long as it will constructively address the fears and disaffections in the country. And we can no longer sweep those fears and disaffections under the carpet. This is what he is saying, and I seriously subscribe to that. It is imperative that the national dialogue that people have been clamoring and calling for, it is important that that national dialogue also settles once and for all the questions of growth, wealth creation, and also sharing formula, as well as inclusive sustainable development, to make sure, in the word of the UN, to make sure that no one is left behind. My third point, and this is taken from the keynote speaker, is that I wish to make, my third point is on the imperative of Nigeria's foreign policy. I think that our foreign policy needs to be very robust going forward. And I think that Bayo alluded to this about greatness, makers of, that we should be not only the makers of our history, but he alerted us to the geopolitical calculations of countries and to the frightening point that we're going to 400 million. This is frightening even to us Nigerians. So you can imagine our neighbors. Some of our neighbors are less than 1 million. You can imagine. So I quite agree with you that this is something that we really need to discuss. So I think that going forward, we need to have a robust foreign policy. Here again, I want to share two relevant comments we often hear from Africans and even non-Africans. And I think that Bayo made a statement about that battery and coal. But do you hear things like the continent needs Nigeria to succeed and the continent needs Nigeria to lead? And usually when people say this, they are insinuating that Nigeria is absent and that hence a vacuum has been created. The second comment is also another familiar one. And you hear people say, oh, you Nigerians are everywhere. Now, I want us to remember the principal position why Nigeria made Africa the center of its foreign policy. It was not for cold hegemonic tendencies. It was driven by early realization that the continent can only guarantee its independence, growth, and security through what we call in the African Union, integrated, prosperous, and secured continent. So at that time, Nigeria certainly stood to benefit from that. And we still continue, we will still continue that. So for me, I think therefore that it is imperative for Nigeria to remain fully engaged, continue its activism on behalf of the continent, and work together with, I think there's a concept that we used to have, willing and able countries in the continent to achieve common continental objectives. There is a greater and urgent this today, tomorrow, and always, because of the current realities that we have of uncertainties, the multiple challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic, and the need for the continent to mobilize global solidarity and cooperation. I mean, there's talk about vaccine, for instance. From the people in the race for vaccine, I don't see a lot of African countries. There are a few prospects and potentials. So it is very important for countries like Nigeria and middle power countries who are committed in the continent to come together and continue to speak on behalf of the continent in the global arena. So I think that for those who are saying, and I heard somebody talking about it recently, that we should do Nigeria first. I think that there was a lot of sense in our doing, in our emphasizing Africa, and with what we know is going to happen in the next few years, where we are going to be 400 million people. Definitely, it is in our interest to continue to have a very engaging African policy, and also for us to lead. Another self-informed reason why our foreign and national security policies need to be robust is the transnational, complex and sophisticated nature of security issues today. Security challenges such as terrorism, organized crimes and proliferation of small arms and light weapons are best handled at the multilateral level as part of collective regional and sub-regional security efforts. So, I mean, in spite of what you hear today of postulations to the contrary, some form of global governance and multilateralism is still relevant for global recovery, collective security, and prosperity. Now, it is not for no reason that the theme of the United Nations General Assembly this year is reaffirming our collective commitment to multilateralism and confronting COVID-19 through effective multilateral action. So I definitely want to say that, want to suggest that whatever we're putting forward to the committee, that a relook of our foreign policy and a revamp of our foreign policy to lead in Africa is definitely in our interest. Now, as for Nigerians being everywhere, we must admit that it is true, even though it's not a bad thing, and that no one should feel the need to give explanations to anyone. However, it is common knowledge that the presence of Nigerians everywhere has been a double-edged sword. I hope that Bike Deborah is going to join us at some point, because this is an area that even I myself want to really speak to her about. Now, my fourth and final point is that it is imperative to give the challenges of irregular migration the priority attention it deserves. And this is tied to what Bayo says about self-respect, about humiliation. And that we should, out of dignity, we should ask ourselves, where's our anger? Where is our pride? And where is our dignity when we see people, number of people, our own people, young people, dynamic people, people who ought to be here in the country, dying in the Atlantic Ocean? So perhaps our humiliation. This is perhaps, and then you also look at the kind of problems we have out of this. I mean, a lot of times when we talk about Nigerians abroad, we talk about the negative image it gives us. No, for me, what is really, really important is not only the negative image alone, but the fact that this issue of economic migration of unskilled labor outside the country, we have to look at it dispassionately, and we have to look at it in a deliberate manner, because it erodes our power and influence abroad. And most importantly, it also erodes our freedom of action. And for now, it is a major irritant in the relationship, by our bilateral relationship with other countries, including our neighbors. So let's take freedom of action, for instance. I was, like Sanusi said, ambassador in Cameroon. And Cameroon, we had up to 5 million Nigerians. I think it's the second largest population, second to Sudan, I think. You don't know how many times your action is predicated on the fact that you have 5 million Nigerians. And I know that the diaspora, they do not think that the government really takes them into consideration. So we really learn from countries who have come to terms with the phenomenon of labor migration. We can no longer leave this issue just to chance. I'm not saying we should regulate who goes out and so on and so forth, but there are countries, Ethiopia here, for instance. I'm sure many of us have gone to the airport and seen how, how Ethiopians are organized to go out as labor migrants. So we need to address this issue going forward. Not only does it have implications on the image of our country, but for me, it has the implication on the kind of action we can even take on global stage. And now, every day you see a WhatsApp post on how Nigerians are treated and so on and so forth. So I think that for this should be a pointer, this should be a point of conversation going forward. What are we going to do? How are we going to have the dignity? Where is our humiliation, as he has said? Where is the dignity? What are we going to do? For as long as we say we're a great country, we're the largest population, but where you see our nationals treated the way they are treated abroad, there is nobody who should really hold their heads, who is in leadership that should hold their heads. And so this is a major problem, and we need to address it. Of course, there is no substitute for providing pathways for regular migration. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that people should not migrate. And Bio made a point about how America, for instance, is made great by their diversity and by the historic migration in the country. So what I'm saying is that we really have to address this, and as urgent as possible, find pathways for people to migrate regularly. And then we have to also address the root causes of irregular migration. And of course, I'm sure the next speakers are going to take up what Bio called vision and... Hello?
Sorry,
so
sorry, please go ahead. It's an interference. We will try to deal with that. Sorry.
Yes, I'm actually concluding now. So what I'm saying is that we have to address the root causes of irregular migration, and also have to step up our law enforcement efforts to dislodge the criminal industry, because there is a criminal industry that feeds on this. And so we need to address these issues. I think that this issue of people migrating, whereas there is the issue of diaspora and diaspora remittance, which is very good, and which we should encourage and do something about. There's also this other issue of irregular migration of Nigerians in even as close as Ghana, with all the issues that we have. Recently, there are also some WhatsApp posts about how people are treated as far away as, so these issues, they kind of eat gradually into your fiber. And I think that we can no longer leave it. This thing, we have to really look at it. We have to look at it from source, that is from our states. We all know the states where some of these people come from. We all also know the kind of industry, the kind of criminals involved. And here I like to really encourage conversation around institutions, some of the institutions that are supposed to, and some of the law enforcement contributions that we need to make. I think that this is a big, big issue, and that needs to be handled. Also because these are also our future. Some of the people going out there are also our future. And we don't want to continue to say that some of them are wasted generations. And the security implications, the economic implications are so huge. So I really cannot overemphasize that this on another hand, I'm also glad to see that this actually made, it was part of the speech of the president in the UN. He mentioned this issue of irregular migration and was calling on the international community to kind of emphasize the positive nature of migration so that it can solve the problem of xenophobia and some of the issues that migrants face. But I think that domestically, in our countries, and definitely in Nigeria, we need to do something about that. I think that I want to stop here. I'm hoping that I might be able to come back to make some concluding remarks. But before I stop, there's one issue, one particular point that Bayo made, and that is that we have to have determinant group of reformers. So we have said everything about the elites. What are we going to do? How are we going to create this consensus? How are we going to have elites who are prepared not only to act, not only this thing, but to serve as oversights? Because what we really need, the impunity he was talking about, we really need for us to self-check ourselves. So all of us who are out here in the United Nations and all the international organizations, all the people in all the experts that we have that he spoke about, how do we bring everybody together? Not only to take part in the development, but to also serve as oversight, to have oversight on this, on our leaders. To check, for instance, you remember we had this election, during elections, where people came together to say they were going to protect their votes. So we need something like that. So I think that if we come out of this conference having a project or having thoughts about how we as elites, those who are outside and those who are distant, have like-minded people start thinking about what we are going to do. This determined group of reformers. I think some people in Nigeria have already started something. They wanted 1 million signature, or to have a platform online of how people can do that. We are brilliant people. How, and this is a challenge to you because you are an idea. How do we collectively come together before the next election to do all those things that you have said? I think that is a challenge. And David, you are in UNDP. How do we, and all the Nigerians in all these organizations, my brother Ojia, my brother in faraway, is it Kajistan, Ozonia, how do we come together and do what is needed? There's some of us who will definitely take part in governance. There's some of us who the oversight is important, because he talked about the elite impunity. How do we check ourselves? How do we check our leaders? How do we make them accountable? And how do we also mobilize the local, the person in the rural area? Who is there for him? Who is there for her? The children, the aged. We have a responsibility. The question is, how do we go forward? The concept note talks about sequential process. So I think for me, we should try to answer that. And we have people all over the world who can lead us on that. So it's a challenge. I thank you very much. I hope I have not spoken out of my time. But like I said, I mean, whenever Bayo speaks, he speaks with so much content that all you can do is to try to emphasize some of this. And thank you very much, Bayo, for these good lessons that you've given us.
Thank you very much.
Yes. My sister Abike is there.
Yes. She is now, yes, we welcome very warmly the executive chairperson of the Nigerian Commission, Nigerian Diaspora Commission, Honorable Abike Dabiri. Thank you very much for joining us. Ambassador Adiza, thank you so much for your very thoughtful input. You emphasized the need for us recognizing the turning point moment for Nigeria and what the turning point issues are, including the issue of irregular migration of unskilled Nigerians. You also talked about institutions, the importance of institutions, and how it is important to deal with these issues now, the urgency of now. And you know, you even made a call to quite a number of the participants on this conference and those who are not here as well, on how we can pull together to begin to address some of these issues. Thank you very much, Ambassador Adiza. Let me, at this point, inform you all that one of the things that the Nigerian community in Ethiopia hopes to achieve with this conference is to put together a policy brief, which would of course highlight a few, which will highlight some of the issues that we've raised and some of the proposals that have also been highlighted in this conference, and be sharing that with the Nigerian 2050 steering committee as our own inputs to the conversation, and also as a way of channeling, you know, the voices of the Nigerians in diaspora, particularly in Ethiopia, into the conversations at home. That's the first. The second is also that this is the first in a series of conversation that we will be having on a regular basis to sort of rally the Nigerian community in diaspora on some of these key engagements that will require not just our attention, but also our voices and our actions in our respective spaces. And we hope that every time we invite you, you will join us. We recognize that we have 39 people, and we thank you very much for joining us. This has been an interesting one so far. At this point, I would like to invite Alhan Miriam Bukar Hassan, who will be sharing with us our own reflection in Hello, if you can hear me. Sorry, there was a slight glitch here. Yeah, thank you very much for staying. And now I would like to invite Miriam Bukar Hassan, who will be sharing with us our reflection as a poem rendition. Miriam, if you are there, please take the floor.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. So the piece I have is titled To Speak About My Country at 60, and it takes us back to history and also speaks about the future and how we can collectively come Azikiwe in 1959, where he said, "For 25 years of my life, I have fought for the freedom of Nigeria. Nigeria will obtain independence on October 1st, 1960, and it makes no difference who becomes prime minister, whether Tafawa Balewa, Awolowo, or myself. So long as Nigeria is free, I will be satisfied. To speak about my country at 60 is to celebrate the largest river in West Africa, the River Niger, that holds the name Nigeria at its core. To speak about my country at 60 is to acknowledge the resilience of the youth. So when a youth says, I love my country, animosity has no room, so we collectively put it out of the house, like, but I wish to be taken back to the days of the pyramids that was made up of the promise that earth kept to us, and ours did flourish with life that skyrocketed our economy, the groundnut pyramids. When the pyramids in Egypt stood no chance, had nothing to show but the weight of the dead on a living land. Our ancestors are gone, but we are not. Their time is over, but ours is now. We cannot go back to days of glory, but we can conjure up its ghost for inspiration. You see, we can resent the government. We can resent this administration and the one to come. But if we do not engage in the process, hold ourselves accountable, Nigeria will never be whole again. As I will always say, government cannot do it alone. It is an entity. Without all of us, it becomes an empty thing. And only through partnerships and collaborative relationships can there be an accelerated progress towards Nigeria's development. So you see, when I speak about my country at 60, I borrow the words of the Egyptians, where they say, everything dies, but time fears the pyramid. You and I are the pyramid. So show up in your grace, in your might, in your excellence. Show up in all that you are at the core of your existence, because it has never been a better time to blow your Nigerian dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miriam. We really appreciate your input. And I'd like to acknowledge openly here that when we were reaching out to someone to give us an input of this kind, Miriam willingly offered to do that for us at no cost. And even though she's in between several other engagements, she decided to also spare us a few minutes to do this. So we thank you very much, Miriam. And we take note. Yes, and we take note of your very interesting call, which we know that as a people, the responsibility is in our hands to come together and help Nigeria to its future. And we thank you very much, Miriam. At this point, I would want to move on to our next speaker. And I'd like to invite Dr. Sam Amadi. Dr. Sam Amadi is an academic, but also a lawyer by profession and by training. And until recently was the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Electrical Regulatory Commission. But currently, he is the coordinator of the Abuja School of Politics, and he will be sharing with us his insights on some of the discussions we've been having so far today. Dr. Sam Amadi, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. As I struggle with sleeplessness because of last celebration of independence. So, okay, I listened to Prof. and of course my sister, who I've not seen for quite a long time, and I'm happy to be here. Yesterday we had conversations about Nigeria at a youth event, and we ended on a note of how do we structure all these ideas in terms of a movement. And I think I would want to come back to two issues that both Prof and Ambassador, Her Excellency, mentioned. I think Prof's very, very, very insightful, you can say, perspective traverse too many issues around development, institutions, even social capital, leadership. But it seems like it ended on the need for leadership as central to solving the problem, and leadership, fail of leadership as an explanation of our crisis, as well as some sort of the transformation. He pointed clearly to the idea of elite consensus, which is well noted in the discourse of development as critical to both policy coherence as well as effective project development, management, and even institution building. I think that, again, the idea that the ambassador takes up from that is how do we now channel this intellectual capacity, these ideas and these passions into creating something different in terms of maybe social organizing. But I take a view about Nigeria that I want to be falsified, so I will advance it. And that view is that the Nigerian problem is largely what I call conceptual incoherence. That Nigeria is thoroughly an incoherent country in its ideas and how it has instrumentalized those ideas. And this incoherence is not just a hypostasis, it's also institutionalized in the sense that if you look at both the concept of state and the concept of governance and the practice of governance in Nigeria, you see this incoherence very clear. And my recent study also showed me that this incoherence, it didn't just start with, it started before 1900. In fact, 1914 rather. Even when the British came, when we were thinking about putting Nigeria together, I've stumbled upon historical documents, some writings of the Lugard and others, that show that they were half-hearted about whether to properly integrate Nigeria, because they also wanted to have opportunity to go to Liverpool and Manchester every weekend or thereabout. So essentially, they didn't quite think about staying in Nigeria and then, integrating the Nigerian people maybe better socially, geopolitically. And this also, why nations fail, part of the argument is that the pattern of engagement, also the pattern on which these colonies were constructed, impacted on different institutional functionality. So the point therefore is, for me, there are three critical fundamental problems of Nigeria I have followed through and I want to share. The first is what I call, which is very common, the nationality crisis. And I see it this way. Prof has mentioned it, that Nigerians don't seem to have that sense in which nations have common value, common mythologies, if you like. We've seen from Bernard Anderson says, countries or societies are imaginative enterprise. They are imagined communities. So that's something that more or less strong or weak that defines a nation state. We know classical definition of what's a state, but a nation state like we are should have some commonalities that are reinforced deliberately over time. So I see the Nigerian problem as one, and I call it, first is the issue around state and religion. And Nigerians really are gun shy about interrogating how the crisis of maybe the inappropriate balance or institutionalization of the relationship between state and religion in Nigerian politics continues to weaken development and national unity. In 1959 Constitutional Conference, Nigeria had the opportunity to decide what to do with state and religion. Of course, there are many models of state-religion contraption or compromise across the world, and each of them come with their problems, and each of them try to manage diversities that appear in different forms. But in 1959, Nigeria, in my view, took a position that usually typical of Nigeria was not principled. And that's what to do with the idea of a plural legal system. How do you organize the legal system in a manner that you take cognizance of diversity of religion and ethnic and other customary beliefs without imperiling the crisis of statehood? And that's the crisis that I saw. So Nigeria struck a bargain, which I call the original sin in 1959 Constitutional Conference in London, that has been our constitution. And today, that original sin plays out in the context that in Nigeria today, somebody is being sentenced to death for blasphemy, which classically is not even a crime in a plural democracy. The Nigerian constitution itself prohibits criminal offenses that are not written in the law, that are, in other words, religious offenses or customary offenses. So the constitution gives you the right to freedom of expression and conscience of opinion. And today we have 12 states that have criminal Sharia, which in my view as a legal scholar as well, is a negation of the democratic norm of a plural society that commits to freedom of expression and the freedom of opinion. Now that's the first Nigerian crisis. What do we want to be, a secular democratic state, or do we want to be a neo-feudal theocratic state? There have been literature on neo-patrimonialism and so on and so forth. Now the critical point for me is that Nigeria made a decision not to be coherently, that's why I said incoherence, not to be a real democratic secular state. And that's the crisis we have today in Nigeria. So this is the crisis of nationality in terms of religious identity. And also, so the Nigerian constitution creates the idea of a multinational state in the sense, in a robust sense, in which there is so much exemptions for what I call ethnic and religious exceptionalism. And so our constitutional framework, both the normative order and the institutional framework, institutional iteration of that norm, is such that weakens to the point of inconsistency the notion of a modern democratic state that's secular, like neutral in the, because people are afraid of the word secular, as if secular approximates to godless or religious. This is the word neutral state that treats people as citizens and reinforce the concept of citizenship. We talk about thick and thin citizenship. I won't go there. Then the second crisis I see, and I will explain how they link, is what I call the crisis of productivity. That crisis manifests in the sense that today Nigeria is basically an unproductive economy. The Minister of Finance has told us clearly that our problem is not overhanging debt. Our problem is actually low production. We have low productivity. If you look at our debt to GDP, it's good. It looks nice. It's not too much. But our debt to revenue service, our debt to budget is very bad. So there's no production happening in Nigeria. That's the problem we have today, that productivity is low. Why is it so? It links to this crisis of incoherence. The Nigerian constitutional order does not seem to create a sense in which reward goes to identity. People are rewarded according to identity, acquired identity, rather than according to production. So I think that the Nigerian state's failure economically, that today, even South Africa, Angola, if you look at the dollar evaluation of the economy, Nigeria is now the third economy in Africa, in spite of the way we like to say we are the center of Africa. If you look at, in terms of all the basic consideration of well-being, we are very, very far off. In terms of investment destination, we're not the top anymore. So this crisis relates to the fact that the Nigerian constitutional norm, and by this, not just the constitutional text itself, even the practice of it, has created a sense in which prerogatives and privileges, in my view, trump up merit. And they can't run a capitalist economy without a sense of uniformity, a sense of homogenization in which citizens are either basic consuming unit or they have a legal relationship with the state, which is based on civic link called citizenship. So the Nigerian normative order has broken that link, which is civic link. So your relationship with the state is civic and not essentially ethnic or religious or other prohibitive or other inherited identities. Now, the third crisis I see flowing from this is a crisis of value. In Nigeria, at the conference we had, people talk so much about, oh, Nigerians are now corrupt, 419, Yahoo, and all that. So they construct the value crisis away from the structure problem. My own view is that values are creations of structure. So the relationship between people and states define the value system. If a state like Nigeria that has no sense of citizenship, no respect for life, every day we have people are killed extrajudicially, whether it's in Lagos, in Aba or Kano or Maiduguri, the state has no recognition of the obligation to protect life. And therefore, people develop that ethics, the value system of predation, violence, or fraud. A state where returns, people cannot be sure of that they are going to get entitlement based on their investment of energy. How can they develop the ethics of productivity, of honesty, and of service that are critical to driving modern capitalist or even if it's welfarist economy? A few days ago, some people called me and said they want me to help them write an article. They have PhDs, they'll be looking for a job, and they heard that DSS recruited, and one village had almost 25 to 30% of all the recruitment. Now, when I was next chairman, I advertised on the job, and the ministers fought with me. I said, Nigeria is creating a new aristocracy. You must have to have somebody, a minister or a senator or somebody in Villa, write for you to get a job in Nigeria today. So when you have these social realities, then your value system will follow those realities. So the Nigerian penchant of preaching value without looking at the very, very corrupt, very chaotic relationship between citizens and state in Nigeria. That's what is reproducing those value crises. So today we have a threat of certificate racketing. It's difficult, even among the universities where I teach. You can say that Nigerian certificates can have up to 25 to 30% discounted for either fraud or not earned. Why? Because everywhere in Nigeria, the state legitimizes, promotes, signals the triumph of expediency, of connection, of privilege. So there's no basic sense in which citizens have a sense of normality, that this is what is expected, what you can call, as ethics of reciprocity or collective action issue. People know that if they do this, they get this. So people are corrupt because they know that others are corrupt and people expect them to be corrupt. And so all our efforts to drive anti-corruption has no focus on reforming the institutions that are actually the heart of the corruption enterprise. So what I want to add to this conversation is simple. That yes, I agree with Prof that leadership is critical. But the point is that the leadership crisis is also produced by the structural problem in Nigeria. The reason why Nigerian elites cannot have a consensus is that the Nigerian constitution and Nigerian fundamental normative order constitutes Nigerians into ethnic and religious entities and not as civic persons, in which case it constrains the development of that consciousness that translates to nationalism and to productivity. So it's easier for Nigerians in America to feel that they have an American dream and feel that they belong to and quarrel over who should be the president. But Nigerians in Nigeria have high level of isolation. And this didn't just start, it was a legacy. And by the way, let me say this, maybe controversial, and those who are prof them, who are famous intellectuals can help us research that. If you look at before independence, Nigerian states, the people that became Nigeria, whether from north or south, most of those people were dominated by feudal domination characterized Nigeria before colonial rule. Colonial rule reinforced that domination. And Nigeria, post-independence, we reproduce and still promote those feudal relationships or neo-feudal relationships. That is why across the country, you see quarrels around chieftaincy, around emirates, around all kinds of quarrels, because we have refused to democratize the Nigerian space and consciously create and reinforce a civic space characterized more by a sense of common belonging. Yes, there's no perfect state. And therefore, once an enterprise of construction, people can have crisis and reconstruct. But the great point I want to leave here is that the Nigerian state seems to legitimize a relationship between citizens and state that is characterized less by what today we call civic network, civic connection, where people see themselves as belonging to a state because they have legal definition of their citizenship. And therefore, the economic policies follow that citizenship in focusing on socio-economic welfare. The fact that Nigeria's wealth has not returned to significant socio-economic welfare is not accident. It flows from that flawed concept of citizenship. The Nigerian state does not allow the money to follow socio-economic crisis and build on economic enterprises that promote social welfare. And that's why today, apart from having the highest number of poor people, we are also the most unequal country in the world, one of the most unequal in terms of coefficient inequality. We are so unequal because the idea of even a common sense of citizenship, which Section 5 of Chapter 2 of the Constitution says is not enforceable, has not in any way been mainstreamed into the program of governance, because the constitutional sense of identity, ethnicity, religion, and if you like, social profile characterize Nigeria. Today in Nigeria, those whose parents are upper class, whether by royalty or by social climbing, are those who have access to resources. So I want to end by saying that, yes, we talk about reformers. How can we create these reformers if we can create a common understanding of the diagnosis of the Nigerian problem? I belong to different pro-democracy platforms, and what I see is incoherence. We have different versions of what's wrong with Nigeria. People simplify it as, oh, failure of leadership. Let's bring the Soludos, the Sanusis, the Konjiwalas. My view that no, let's first solve the first order problem. to remove this incoherence in our constitutional norm, to create a country that sees everybody as one person connected by civic link, not by ethnic and religious identity. Nigeria has mainstream religious difference into its constitutional order. And that's why today, Nigeria is not one republic. Nigeria is at best 3 republics that are, building a coalition, cooperating and sometimes not cooperating. This might look like as if probably is too radical, but it's not at all. That's the reality. Today, more than ever, the idea of a Nigeria separated or Nigeria where people feel excluded, even without evidence, is so rife. Again, to think about the idea of building institutions. Institutions themselves are ideas that are now structured. But in Nigeria today, we're talking about restructuring. It's debatable. People don't understand the concept. People take it politically. And the crisis that 2023 stares us in the face, and everybody's thinking about the post of dominance. So the struggle now is to win power. The struggle is not to use power to reform the Nigerian state in a way that this country with so much endowment, with so much brain power, can have the enabling environment to be able to produce quality goods and service. So Nigeria's, to restate, the Nigerian problem for me is a problem that is historic, is structural, but it's above all conceptual. What is the idea of Nigeria? Are we thinking about a modern democratic secular state? Are we thinking about a new feudal technocratic state, a state that gives exception to religion and ethnicity? Are we thinking about a diverse people that become one nation state? Or are we still thinking about a diverse multinational states coming together to compete for political power and therefore use it to reinforce our competitive advantage? I think that's really the crisis Nigeria has to resolve as it celebrates 50th anniversary. If we resolve this first order problem, we can resolve the issue of leadership recruitment, we can resolve the issue of elite consensus, and we can resolve the issue of how we will model new leadership that will produce high quality goods and services. That's what I would like to contribute to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amadi, for a very intriguing input that you've provided. You've spoken about what you consider as a conceptual incoherence as the first order problem that needs to be resolved in advancing a new Nigeria going forward. I would not attempt to dilute by summarizing some of the points that you have made. I am sure that this would also form some of our reflections in the exchanges that would follow. At this point, let me invite Honorable Abike Dabiri Erewa, who has been with us for quite a while, and indeed, we had played a video message at the beginning of this conference, but now that she's with us here now, we would invite her to please speak to us and share our own reflections as we celebrate the 68th independence of Nigeria. Honorable Abike Dabiri, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I won't be saying much, just to commend you and say what you're doing is very good. And Peter, I missed Mr. Bayer's speech, but I was there. I listened to Ambassador Hadiza, the poet, fantastic, and Mr. Amadi. So I just want to commend what you're doing. I'll just say a few things about the diaspora, and I'll take it from where Ambassador Hadiza stopped. My sister, thank you for that wonderful presentation. And I'll just say a few things about what you have said. And just to add the fact that, yes, I agree with you absolutely. Nobody will develop our country but ourselves. And the diaspora has a major role to play. And thank you, Nice, for what you're doing. You know, we have a team in place looking at diaspora engagement and structure. And we believe that we need to engage the diaspora further than we're doing. And as Ambassador Hadiza said, you know, we also need to celebrate ourselves, but at the same time, as Nigerians, what are we doing wrong in the diaspora? So it's a two-way thing. I think my speech, I've talked about what we're doing in terms of NIDCOM, the Diaspora Investment Trust Fund, which is in place, the Diaspora Investment Summit. Hopefully diaspora voting will soon become a reality because it's been tabled at the National Assembly. We have over 30 focal persons on diaspora in various states now. So you, the diaspora, have people to talk to. And there are no more excuses. as to, oh, we have this potential, we have that potential. We really, 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 at this point in time, need to get ourselves together. And like even our sister, the poet said, it's not about government, it's about every one of us collectively working together to build this great nation. Now, we hope that the diaspora policy will soon become a reality. And Ambassador Adisa talked about, creating a vaccine for coronavirus. Yes, Nigeria is not on the list, but there are Nigerians in various countries that are part of the solution to the vaccine. We have a Nigerian in America who is one of those seeking, getting the solution for the vaccine. So what are we doing back home with ourselves and for ourselves? That's the challenge I want to throw to NICE as we continue this your program. I look forward to the communique so that I can be part of whatever government is doing back home. And I just also want to say that, in terms of who we are as a people, yes, some Nigerians behave badly, but that shouldn't stereotype us as a people. Take Dubai, for instance, what recently happened. Nigerians recorded a video, and that's not the norm. You record a video abusing the country of host. Dubai gave us free flights, almost 6 flights, and Nigerians started sleeping in front of the mission, expecting more and more, and it didn't go down well with them. But at the same time, we didn't allow Dubai to just treat us anyhow. So when Dubai stopped issuing visas, Nigeria said Emirates will not come back. And then they now, withdraw their decision. So my message is this to Nigerians in the diaspora: let us behave ourselves. But at the same time, Nigeria should not sit back and watch anybody trample on us as a nation. And I think Ambassador Hadiza stressed that point. So yes, our foreign policy needs to be stronger. And I believe that is being done by the ministry. We need to stand firm for ourselves as citizens, but at the same time, it's important to behave ourselves and be good ambassadors. Because as she said, if we're breaking laws, dying at sea, crossing the borders, respect begets respect. So I just want to commend NICE for putting together. I've enjoyed every presentation. I look forward to all presentations, which I will formally also present to the ministry as well as NITCOM, so that we can learn from you. And I commend NICE for putting this together, and congratulations and best wishes. At 3 o'clock, we'll be talking to DG of the coordinator of the national coordinator of the PTF of COVID-19 to address issues concerning travelers to Nigeria. So I hope some of you can join. There have been complaints, so he will address the issue. And I want to particularly thank the president of NICE. When Nigerian prisoners were in trouble over there coming home, he was on his phone. He was, on it, ensuring that they got back home out of prison, and I'm glad they are back home. So I just want to assure you that wherever you are as Nigerians in the diaspora, you have NITCOM that will always be there for you. So it's a symbiotic relationship. We need you. You need your country too. Well done, NICE, and thank all the speakers. Congratulations and God's blessings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Abike Dabiri. And I think it is also proper for us to acknowledge your support, particularly on the issue that you raised on the Nigerian prisoners. Every time we reached out, you were willing to assist, and you did assisted in several ways. So we thank you very much, and we wish you best of luck with your assignments as the Executive Chair of NITCOM. At this point, we will now move to the last speaker for the day before we then have an exchange of conversation in terms of questions. I'd like to invite my sister and my big sister and friend, Idayat Hassan, the Executive Director of the Center for Democracy and Development, West Africa, CDD West Africa, based in Abuja. Idayat Hassan, you have the floor. We can't hear you yet. Well, we don't seem to have Idayat's voice. You're muted if you can hear me. Okay, if we don't have her yet, I mean, we will do everything we can to get her voice on as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we've had quite a lot of questions, quite a lot. And I know that our speakers have also engaged with the chat room to see some of this question. So I think I begin with what I consider the fundamental question. many of the presentations have talked about the importance of elite consensus. I think the only person who has put something before that is Dr. Amadi on the issue of the conceptual incoherence. However, if we stay on the issue of the elite consensus, I think the question that a lot of people have asked is, how do we begin to cultivate this consensus? And I think that Professor Adebayo Olukoshi is in a good position to give us his reflection on that. A lot of people have questioned the constitutional framework as it is at the moment. Nigeria and the Nigerian parliament for the last three tenures, so to say, have engaged in some form of constitutional reforms. A lot of people have questioned that that does not solve the fundamental problems. Can we begin to have a bit more open and maybe, like you said, have a group of reformers sitting around the table and then agreeing on what this elite consensus is? What is the way to go? Because the parliamentarians keep insisting this is our role as representatives of the people. However, we are saying that fundamentally there is a question that needs to be answered on our country as a nation state. Professor Olukoshi, what is your view on that?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Ibrahim. And I'd also like to thank most sincerely Hadiza and Amadi, Sam Amadi, for the very strong input which you made into the conversation. In a sense, Ibrahim, it's not possible, as you rightly said, to address the question of how to make an elite consensus without actually engaging some amount about a foundation. I hope, Sam, that this is something which we can take further in the conversations in the weeks ahead, because it's a critical point which does need to be addressed. The elements of crisis, of productivity, and of values which you pinpoint as arising from that quote-unquote original sin are elements which I can myself relate to and accommodate. But here is my take. To the extent, Sam, that there is no nation state that is born perfect, at a very conceptual level, to the extent that there is no nation state that is born perfect, to that extent, you will always need a leadership intervention to help in the process of state and nation building to create as perfect a union as is possible within the demands of the times and of the periods. You get my point. To the extent to which there is no construct that can be perfect for all time, that's the flip side of this. So not only that there is no union that is perfect at birth, and to that extent, there would always be a place and a role for the kind of leadership intervention which we are calling for. We also note, purely on the basis of the comparative experience of state and nation building around the world, that there is also no union that is perfect for all time, which means that over a period of time, a construct, a polity which is considered to be adequate for a season may in fact become dysfunctional for another season. And there again, a capacity to recognize the periods of dysfunction and disconnect or of discontent as they build up become an integral part of the leadership quest that we have also referred to. So that what it implies, in my view, is not a static understanding of leadership, but rather a dynamic interpretation of leadership over a long durée, and addressing the issue of what happens when leadership fails. And we know from history that when the demands of state and nation building shift fundamentally from one epoch to the other, and leadership is unable to read those changes, you either have an outright collapse, as has happened in the history of nations, or you have a moment of revolution, as has also happened in the history of nations. Because in the end, revolutions are nothing actually other than a holistic collective reset and correction mechanism in the history of political communities. So I would suggest that far from being separate from the original sin as defined, the leadership question is actually an integral element. And to the extent to which leadership fails to answer that original sin, or to address it in a manner that would be satisfactory over a durée, a long durée, to that extent, we actually do have a reproduction of the problem, even in the context of changes in politics, economy, and society over time in Nigeria, right? How do we then build an elite consensus? Ibrahim, my take is very simple. Every country also has a wake-up moment. Every country has a wake-up moment. You know, we've had a few ourselves as Nigerians. And if we don't take those wake-up moments, that's what makes, if you look at the most recent set of writings in the comparative literature on the making of elite consensus, you will find that Guillermo O'Donnell, for those who may be interested, looking at the pacted transitions of Latin America, as he described it, indicated that in the context of a stalemate from 1945, in fact, even going back in the case of Argentina to the period around the First World War, into the 1970s and 80s, it took 8 decades for the leadership in Latin America, constituted around 3 principal poles: the military, the politicians, and the trade unions and social movements, what sometimes we call civil society, to actually recognize that unless they would pact an agreement, hence the notion of a pacted transition, they would not be able, and it would be a question of one power block canceling out the other on a continuous basis. Trade unions succeeding in making the system ungovernable, the military overthrowing the elected politicians, the elected politicians making a mess of their mandate, in a cyclical manner that for the Latin American elite became a wake-up moment of the 1990s, and hence the whole notion of the third wave of democratization that Samuel Huntington was then to introduce into the literature. And when I talked about the experiences of Japan and of China and of Germany, of France, of all of the other countries that I cited, it is precisely that wake-up moment. The American Revolution was a wake-up moment. Again, revisionist literature around it precisely indicated. And who are the people? They are the people we call the constitutionalists, the John Adamses, the Abraham Lincolns, and the Washingtons, General Washington. Remember, a mixture of people, war generals and warlords and robber barons and the good, the bad, and the ugly coming together to say, listen, guys, if we want these United States to remain, we need to do something differently. And I think this is the situation. There is no section of the Nigerian elite that is 100% happy with Nigeria. Because in any case, even if you are organized only on the basis of a looting agenda, your looting only lasts for a period of time before another elite comes in to start looting, and then they start probing your own looting in order to loot your looting. So there is no section of the elite that is completely happy. And unless people begin to see beyond their narrow prisms, and I want to suggest to you that, Amadi, that there is a possibility for that to happen. Because actually, Nigeria is much more, I think our sociologists need to do some work around integration, national integration again. Nigerians have a welter of factors and processes that connect them to one another in a web of complex interdependence than we sometimes recognize. And that welter of interdependence also sometimes shapes the choices that sometimes will be defined in a cynical way as our mumu. Sometimes it's not complete mumu, actually. It's a question of weighing options. If you take me as a Nigerian and you tell me you want to go back to those 3 countries you mentioned, Amadi, I will fight you, because I tell you that my own identity is far more complex. And a lot of Nigerians are what I call the Nigeria Center Forward. We are mixed, if not biologically, by our sociological experiences. We are so terribly mixed that it would be complete mess and chaos to try to package us into neat boundaries of a kind that would be almost impossible to make work in the context of new entities. So there is enough ingredients on the ground. And, you know, WhatsApp messages that we see sometimes going around reminding us that Dangote's wife marries Otedola's, Dangote's son marries Otedola's daughter, the Emir of Ilori and the Emir of Kano have historical relationships, well, and a lot of the links between Kebbi and Ilori. I mean, those things are not for nothing. They are not for nothing. And I hope that this generation of elites, if not the next generation that succeeds, will actually come to recognize that there is strength in tapping these interlinkages and this web of dependencies to overcome many of the myths that a vested interest continues to perpetuate about identity politics in our country, purely because it is highly profitable to continue to argue and to function this way. The whole literature on neo-patrimonialism is actually about that. Richard Joseph called it prebendal politics, the politics of the prebends, distributing the prebends. And there's no shortage of adjectives that have been used. Peter Ake talked about colonialism and the two publics. And I think there is a commonality that has been forged out of many inefficiencies and many deficiencies. There is a commonality that we are getting to another wake-up moment where we are all so thoroughly frustrated. I don't see any Nigerian who is not frustrated. Even if you are a millionaire, Dangote, one of the richest people in the world, isn't it a shame that you still have to put a generator in your compound and drill a borehole and hire security guards and put up a huge fence? And when you visit your counterparts in other parts of the world, the silence and the peace in their compound, you hear the birds singing. They come to visit you, they hear the humdrum of generators. There is a message in that. And that's where dignity begins to be constructed. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I mean, and that's a very important one.
I can make a quick point there. One second.
Yes, Dr. Amadi, please.
I think, Prof, I totally agree with you. And that's the point. The point is that we need to surface these issues and create clarity. So you are totally right. There are all states are constructed and constructed over time. So the point I'm making is that the elite that will lead must first have a narrative, a good diagnosis of the problem. And that will lead them to a guiding policy. That guiding policy will generate sets of coherent actions that reinforce themselves. So that you don't do something that then you go back and do something that totally undermines what seems to be the direction. So totally agree with you. Leadership is key, but it's not the way I just think about it. Oh, Harvard, Sam Amadi from Harvard. No. It's about a conversation that brings out clarity. It's a sharp production of knowledge and clarity. Then leaders emerge from that production and drive transformation in line with that clarity. So I totally agree with you. That's the point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input, Dr. Sam Amadi. Ambassador Adisa, I want to sort of bring you in at this point. Professor Lugoshi talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly, the necessity of having this as a collective action, bringing all sides, all sections, and all divides together to have a conversation about the future of the country. However, in your presentation, you did speak about the challenge that we have currently with having that kind of collective conversation, particularly when you look at what people in my generation call the cancel culture, where anyone who disagrees with our point of view, with our identity, whether it's religious, ethnic, or gender, we sort of think they have no space in the conversation. What is the role of, I don't want to use the government because you don't represent the government, at least in this conversation. However, how do you see this as a role for the government in trying to bring together all these varying voices to help to sort of determine what is the common understanding of the problem that we have and how we move forward? What would be your view on this, Ambassador Adisa?
Thank you, Sanusi. I want to thank Sam, even though Sam, as usual, you kind of put a sort of damper to some of the things that were saying. But I'm glad that Professor Bayo kind of put together something that we can work on. Now, what can the government do? I think as much as I think that the government has a role in mobilizing, I still think that countries who have succeeded, and I'm not a big historian here, are countries that have smaller government and bigger. Some people have bigger private sector. Some people have bigger social and what some called civic duty. Here, I like to really say that I wouldn't give so much, especially in our context, I wouldn't give so much credence or so much, I wouldn't depend so much on what the government would do to mobilize what we're looking for. That's why I kind of emphasized, if you like, civil society organizations, NGOs, but NGOs that are Nigerian and civil society that are Nigerian based, if there is anything like that, if they actually exist. There are some people who think that they don't exist because they're all funded by foreign money and therefore foreign interest. So to answer your question, I will give the primary responsibility and role to the civil society. And that's why you heard me talking about oversight function. Because all of us are talking about the impunity of elites, especially impunity of elites in leadership. Even though Bayo said he doesn't want to talk about transformative leadership. But that is where our question is. That is where our challenge is. Take a local government. Why did we have local governments? We made local governments so that we can bring development down to the grassroots. But all of us know the story of how all of that goes down. For instance, about budgeting, the relationship between the governor and the local government chairperson, and how all of that goes down. So what we really need is for people to insist on accountability. And I am thinking that in some countries where it is the government that does the embassy. For instance, in South Africa, I think they have succeeded for some reason. Again, this is this question of moments. This is a question of the Arab Springs of this world, the apartheid of this world, the liberation movement. The psychic or the psychology of some of these countries are quite different. I just hope that when we have this, our great moment, that it is not a great moment that will sweep all of us under the bridge. So I would give I think a lot of effort should have to come from outside the government. A lot of mobilization of the elites should come out of the government. Definitely, government has to give some institutional backing. And that's why you heard me talking about our Nigerians in diaspora, our Nigerians in international organizations, the BIOS, David, you yourself in the African Union. These are the kind of people who should ask questions and say, no, this is enough. All of us are well-traveled. Simple things. For instance, simple things that you want to see in the airport. Simple. And these are not very complicated things like Sam is making them. They're not complicated things. When you talk about institutions, these institutions are also institutions manned by people, institutions manned by Nigerians, institutions that are manned by people who, when you sit next to them, they will tell you about, oh, how this is not functioning, how when I went to this country, everything, their street is clean, and so on and so forth. And the next thing that same person is doing when he's on his desk, you marvel. The next thing that person will do will be things that will set us 20 years back. So this is about people also. So I would still say that to mobilize, and there is no time, to really mobilize for the next elections, we need to encourage people. This is why I agree with Sam. We need to encourage people who have the right thinking and the right concept. People who are not in this for a political position that they are looking ahead of. People who are not in this because somebody is behind them that is pushing them, what we call in Nigeria money bags or whatever. But people who have the like-minded people who have the interest, not only interest of people from Kano or people from Enugu, but interest of Nigeria. This is also another place where I agree with him, where they feel this civic responsibility, where they believe there is a social contract, where they are not going to ask, if I do this, I need to get ABC. It may not even be in their generation, but let's help and then get the ball, kick the ball to the next person. It doesn't have to be we who have to benefit. I don't want to use this cliche of don't ask what America, ask what you can do for. These are some of the things that really we in the diaspora can actually do. But we are the worst criminals. We are the, not criminals, we are the guilty. An average person in diaspora, if you speak to him, kind of things he says about his country. And then you expect now the next person who is not a Nigerian to respect you. I used to tell people when I was serving in Southern Africa that, look, we have two kinds of Nigerians here. We have the skilled people, those of you in the international organization with your suits and so on. And then we have the unskilled person who is running away because he doesn't have a regular distance. I said, as far as the government or the country or the immigration officer in the airport is concerned, you are all the same. He doesn't see that you are working in an international organization getting dollars or that you are well suited. He sees you both as Nigerians. So until all of us now see that the unskilled labor or the unskilled person or the illegal immigrant in Europe, in Italy, and you yourself are the same, and then do something as a role model even, do something that will ease, that will remove that kind of sight without expecting any reward. Until we can do that, I don't think we have any chance at all, to be very honest with you. So I would say that we need to do this ourselves. I'm not underrating government. I think government can serve somewhere, but I think what we really need in that country is to hold people accountable. And we have not been successful in holding ourselves accountable as government. Somebody needs to really do it.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Adisa Mustafa, for that very important intervention on this as a civic role, essentially, and how we have to make sure that we as citizens then play our role as not just a passive bystander, but as active and engaged individuals who are playing the oversight role as necessary. I would like to invite Muazu Umar. He's had quite a number of questions and an input on the chat. Mr. Muazu Umar, if you wouldn't mind, please take the floor to ask your questions to any of our speakers. Hidayat Azan is not able to join us. I think she's having very technological challenges at the moment. So Umar, Muazu Umar, please take the floor if you're there.
Thank you very much for acknowledging me. I think Prof has really expanded on the world view of what Nigeria should do and where Nigeria should be. Prof was with us here in Dakar, and I'm not sure he ran away and left us, but we are glad that he's still there, waxing stronger. We will get him back soon. My questions are actually critically with regards to the summary of the presentation of Prof. My understanding is that, Prof, you are talking about the values that we all need to hold ourselves accountable with or for, and ensuring that we build a society whereby the only thing that matters are those values and fairness and justice against those values. And then making sure that there is a leadership that is leading this in a sustainable manner over time. But my critical question is, we know, all of us know, Nigeria is composed of different worldviews as far as a nation state is concerned. Let's be very practical. Dr. Amadi just talked about the sentencing of someone in Kano for an offense that he believes is not civil, is not in the Constitution. But believe me, if he mentions that in Kano, somebody will attempt to cut his head. And that's the reality of Nigeria. For him, that is his own worldview. The person in Kano believes absolutely that that person has committed an offense that he should pay for. So we have this extremely contradictory worldview by which we want to build Nigeria. And sometimes they are very irreconcilable. How do you fuse leadership with this contradiction? How do you bring aggregate understanding that there are higher values than what we hold on to, or probably we take these values to our locals and then leave those values and then have different set of values at the national level? Is it possible to have two different set of values? The one you have at your locality for your religion, for who you are, and then the one that will serve as a nation. I really am not sure whether that is possible in the context of Nigeria. And that probably takes me to a last option of, are we sure that it does not have to get to worse before it gets better? Has the momentum really comes? Because the momentum, as far as I'm concerned, has not arrived. We are still grumbling in our corners. We have not seen the massive mobilization because we are still talking of IPOB. We are still talking about Odudua. We are still talking about all these divisions. How can you have people talking about these divisions and then talking about nation building? I just need a response on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muazu Umar. If my research is accurate, you're the Director of Research at Giaba in Senegal. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Well, it's an open question. Professor Lukoshi, Ambassador Adiza, Dr. Amadi, do we have a state legislation, and then do we have a separate legislation at the federal? I mean, what we have in the federal system, like we see in Germany, and I think even in the United States of America, you know, where there are state level laws that govern some of these things, and at the federal, there is a unifying law and all of that. What's your view of this?
Let me try before Prof gives
Please go ahead.
I think it's totally correct. In fact, interestingly, when this conviction happened, interestingly, lawyers in Kano, like you said, good lawyers all agreed. One second. The lawyers in Kano agreed that, look, this is a good offense. Even a body as respectable bodies wrote to say, execute this guy as a deterrent. I recall the governor saying, if this sentence comes to me, I'm going to sign it. When he was to appeal, no lawyer wanted to take the appeal. In fact, the court didn't allow him access to the brief. Femi Falana had to, of course, issue a statement, and I think he finally took the brief. Now, what is at play is this. All countries in the world, there are legal pluralism, laws that cater, like what he said, maybe local values, so customary laws, and so on and so forth. But the crisis, like I pointed out, is that the concept, I had an opportunity to speak with President Wahid, the president of Indonesia, when I was a fellow at Kennedy School many years ago. And I asked him, he was a reputed, one of the most reputed Islamic clerics in the world. And I asked him, why did Indonesia, with 80 to 90 something percent Muslims, didn't incorporate Sharia as their basic law? And he told me clear that they themselves agreed to exclude it so that it's not part of the public law of the country. So the crisis I pointed out is not a crisis that people may not have different religions, but it's a crisis of how do you order your different religious, if you like, comprehensive moral view, as Ross tried to provide his political liberalism. The idea that somehow a state must find a way to define the core values, whether it's value of equality and operating at a high level. So he's right to say maybe you have 200 local values. By local, I mean defining interpersonal relationship. Then there are values that define personal relationship at the level of the polity. So the crisis here is not that we have Sharia rules. They always exist at the level of personal law. Is that by 2000, driven, people say politically, maybe, but some people are adapting for what they could call true experience of Islamic experience. And the politicians, they came together, converged in Zamfara. I went to court. Myself on Sabakoba, when I was working with Sabakoba, I went to court to challenge that law in Zamfara, in Guzo High Court myself. And then when the case was on, I traveled to US for my studies, and of course went to Court of Appeal. Now the point is that they refused to go to the Supreme Court to say, can you have a democratic state with a democratic constitution where a religious law becomes a criminal law? Now, the difference is that the criminal law requires the use of coercive power of the state to enforce. It's not enough to say it only applies to Christians or Muslims. If the law says that you have a freedom of religion, which means freedom to say, I'm no longer of this religious tradition, that means you cannot punish anybody for blasphemy. Why? Because somebody can decide not to be a Christian or a Muslim again. So the tension between having criminal Sharia, which means this is now an offense defined by state law, prosecuted by state law, imprisoned by state law for offenses that are in essence religious offenses, is the addition that came in 2000. And my reading of it is that in real sense, it amounts to a fundamental restructuring of the Nigerian state. So today we are arguing whether we should restructure or not. The truth is that 2000 we restructured fundamentally by creating two different legal systems. Now, in 2000, we didn't feel it because nobody was convicted. That's the Nigerian problem. When Nigerians introduce a contradiction, because nobody activates that contradiction, it's like a landmine. We don't react because nobody activates it. Now, suddenly, politics or circumstances activate that landmine and it explodes. If they did convict this young man of this offense, and maybe the other underage person that was also convicted in Kano, we will not know that the idea that the state legislature triggering democratic process, that's a contradiction. This is not like some clerics coming to make law. This is House of Assembly of a state that arguably we have both Christians and Muslims and animists, making a law that makes offense defined in a religious code that is not defined in other religious codes, for example, an offense, it's a violation of the concept of liberal democracy. Now, you don't have to be a liberal democrat. You don't have to have a democracy. It can be a feudal state. It can be an emirate or a canonical state like Italy, like Rome, so it can be different models of states. That's what I'm making. But if you choose a model, then that model has to be consistent. The Nigerian case, therefore, is that we have this case where the Supreme Court will obviously look at this law and say, how can you have freedom of religion in your law, freedom of expression, opinion, and convict somebody for blasphemy? Not criminal. There are criminal slander in a criminal code. So if you go and slander religious authority, they can prosecute you for slander. But when you prosecute somebody for blasphemy, you are prosecuting him for expressing unauthorized religious speech. That's what blasphemy is. So the point, to answer the question clearly, is that yes, maybe Prof will define for us, can a nation state exist with multiple value systems that are comprehensive, not just relative or low-level values, okay, values about surviving, coping, social capital. But can we have value systems that are comprehensive, that are different, at the same time be able to build consistent and coherent sense of nationhood? Is there a level of contradiction that disable the level of action and coherence you have to be a state? Let's take America. Let me end with this. The US today is in a struggle that if they keep on polarizing, they can come to a point where it's difficult to have a nation state, because two divergent and conflicting value systems are now no longer incommensurable, and therefore incapable of generating an ethics of the state. The state is an idea. The modern state grew out of a theological disruption in Europe, and that created an order that subordinated the secular over the religious, whether it's a good or not. And all crises around reversing that structure of the normative philosophical state is an idea, it's a model, it's a norm. All effort to reverse it will always create conflict. And that's partly one explanation for what we have in some part of the Middle East. And that's partly what Boko Haram is all about. It's about reversing the construction of the normative state where the secular overrides the religious. And so we must be careful with this very fanciful idea that we can move around, we can disregard these principles and historical lessons and still be a great country. That's why I disagree. We can't create the world as we like it. We have to create a world, pay attention to lessons from history and the reality of how ideas can mix together or not mix together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amadi.
Sanusi, before you call Prof, I just want to address Muazu's question about whether there is a difference of outlook. And I want to be very simple. Look at it as a very simple issue. I do not think that the poor in the north, the poor in the southwest, and the poor in the southeast are different, or that they have different outlook. So while we who are educated are talking about all these big issues, the human rights, the issues of differences, whether there is a secular state and there is another law existing side by side, whether that is correct. For me, perhaps maybe because I'm a woman and I think in terms of bread and butter issues, for me, there is an immediate question and there is an immediate problem. And what is that? Poverty. Poverty that we share in the north is the same that the poverty that is shared all over. So let us not complicate. Let us be the type of elites that look at issues that are immediate, issues like, what do you say, quick impact issues, issues that will solve immediate problems. People are not going to work because we said they should quarantine, for instance. We want to know how many poor we have. We want to know households that we can give trader money, or is it whatever money. We want to be able to even move our people from putting their money under their pillows to people who can trust, walk around the corner in their villages to have a bank. Those are, I think, the issues. I am not saying those issues that you're talking about are issues that concern us. For instance, when an NGO, an international NGO comes into your country and you allow the international NGO to talk to you about democracy, about elections, about human rights, and he does not know your reality. Elections and democracy and voting, these are very important things at the level of us elites. Why? Because we want to know who is going to represent us. The common man really wants simple things. So please, let's not sometimes get carried away. The poor in the north, the poor in the southeast, the poor in the southwest, they are all the same. We have a responsibility, like Bayo said, the social contract, the bargain. What are we bringing to the table to those people? There's violence against women. There's the aged. Nobody's caring for them. So let's please sometimes be more realistic about the way we argue. I'm not in any way minimizing some of this concept, but sometimes when we meet, we tend to talk more about those things that are complicated, that will take many years. How many years does it make a professor? Many years. But what the people in Kaurana Moda, the person in Shagamu, is looking for, it's very simple, and we are intelligent enough to bring solutions. So I mean, Sam and I always have this to-in and fro-in, but this is really important.
No, thank you very much for also emphasizing the need to sort of link the point that Professor Olukoshi made in terms of, you know, the social contract, the bargain between the state and the society, and how this should be one of the unifying factors, if you like, for fashioning out a new Nigeria. Professor Olukoshi, the floor is yours now.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ibrahim. I think both Sam and Hadiza have made my life very simple. As you ask a very tough question, but an important one to address, and perhaps what I could contribute in addition to what Sam and Hadiza have put on the table is simply to say that, you know, from my point of view, contradictions will always be an integral part of any political life and political community. There will always be contradictions. And the big challenge is to ensure that at every point in time, there is both the will and the framework for addressing those contradictions in a peaceful way, ideally, without having to go to blows in order to sort them out. That's one of the basic things we have from Political Science 101, right? If you unpack that a bit further, you recognize, Muazu, that you and I, Sam, Hadiza, all of us, we are bearers of multiple identities. There's nobody in this world who is the bearer of one single identity. None. And therefore, it means implicitly that in the everyday construction of our lives, we are in fact negotiating multiple moralities at the same time. You see my point? Identity as a Nigerian, identity as a man, identity as a woman, identity as a Black, identity as Hausa speaking or Yoruba speaking, identity as a Muslim, identity as a gerontocrat or a younger person, we carry so many identities with us. And with each of them comes a certain universe. And the universe that prevails at any point in time is a function of many things that are at play. When it suits, when it is unsuitable to project which identity in what context is negotiated on a daily basis. And that actually is what the stuff of life and experience is made of. So that for me, therefore, Mwazu, it is not going to be a case of saying that we don't have a problem, but that actually those problems are not insurmountable. And the way in which the inflection, which I saw with your question, is one of suggesting an impossibility. But I actually want to also suggest to you that successful nations and great nations have actually lived with the fact of contradiction. You know, maybe I would differ slightly with Amadi there, although Amadi, you qualified your position by making a distinction between the relative and the comprehensive in the context of the moralities that are in competition. Well, you know, like the example of the US which you cited, multiple moralities are at play between the Mormon and the Jew and the evangelicals and the, you know, around simple things which you might consider to be integral part of liberal democracy, like the right of a woman over reproduction. It might seem quite straightforward in Sweden as a settled matter, no debate. Fast forward at least Sweden as it is today, fast forward to the United States, and you'll find that it's actually a fertile ground of all kinds of contestation, around which political careers are made and unmade, and therefore a domain that is suffused with plenty of opportunism, including the opportunism of legitimacy-hungry politicians. Not different from Nigeria, not different. And I would say that, you know, living with contradictions may not be something we are particularly accustomed to, especially where they are of a political nature. But in fact, some of them are latent, some of them are active. We happen to be in a moment where there is some relative activity around some of those contradictions at the foundation of the country that were latent for a period, but which have reared their heads in the contemporary period. But they don't, in my view, spell a death sentence or an impossibility scenario for the country. Will there be a possibility for it to pass? If you read Obasanjo's trilogy about Zamfara and the declaration of Sharia, you'll see the kind of wisdom and, well, let me not say wisdom, the logic that informed his decision not to either take political or legal action following the declaration of Sharia in Zamfara. And perhaps the jury is still out, and perhaps time will tell. But I think it's also remarkable that what could have appeared at the time to be the beginning of an immediate unraveling of the country actually blew over for a period of time and did not assume the kind of conflagratory dimension which many of us feared at the time was likely to happen in the wake of the declaration. So, you know, yeah, it's there. It's a fact. There are other contradictions. And here also, Amadi Sam, I would like to say that much as we have the sentence, for example, which you refer to in Kano on the blasphemy, there are also countervailing and equally radical pronouncements and legal framings that have been put in place in other parts of this same federation that reaffirm and reassert a liberal logic in the polity. And they are subsisting in the classic way that some might say that 1,000 flowers will bloom and sometimes bloom side by side. But I hope that even the Kano situation with itself, if it doesn't find a legal solution, will find a political solution. And there is a lot of political conversation going on. But it does not make for an impossibility in the making of a great nation.
Thank you very much, Professor Olukoshi, for your input on that. Well, we've overreached our time way beyond what we had allotted ourselves, but this has been a very, very engaging conversation. I mean, I resisted calls from so many colleagues online who said, oh, please cut short and all of that, because I thought that this is, if we're talking about remaking Nigeria and putting it on the path for greatness, I think that these are conversations that need to happen, and a lot of them need to continue to happen in many corners. Of course, not the least in the diaspora, where we have quite a number of Nigerians who are contributing to development of other countries, other climes, other situations. And why would it be difficult to then come together to have such conversation about our own country? And so, like I said earlier, we will be having quite a number of these, and we're very glad that this first iteration of it has been a very exciting one. Thank you for everyone who has participated. We've averagely had about 35 people stay with us consistently on this call. In this season of so many Zoom calls, that is a record for us, and we're very happy to have those of you who have been with us join us. At this point, I would like to invite the Vice President of the Nigerian community in Ethiopia, Ms. Vera Nwakwa, to please take us through a summary and the conclusion of this meeting. Ms. Nwakwa, please. Madam Vera Nwakwa, you have the floor. I suspect she might be having technical itch as well. If the president is there, Mr. Mozuafo, would you want to take the floor, please?
Okay, yes, thank you so much. And I think this has been a very rewarding conversation, very enriching, very inviting. And I think it has just opened the way for further conversation around the issues that have been raised. And I'm happy that we have proposals of things that we can do now, things that we can begin to work on. Not just talking about the issues are happening at the problems and not seeking the way out. We all aspire to have a big country, a greater Nigeria, where things work, where we can go out and proudly we speak of our country. One thing that we know very well, I mean my community, that when you go out to talk about your parents or about your family, about your people, actually you are indicting yourself. So when we go out and we speak so badly about our country, even though it is not the worst and we desire to have more than we have, we're actually indicting ourselves. There is a common saying that there are very good people around the world, but if you go around and you cannot find one, please be one. So that we don't just keep on complaining, but we should seek ways. When we ask questions, we're actually seeking ways. When we act on them, we're actually seeking ways. But what is bad is keeping quiet completely and feeling that everything is fine. I think we have heard from Prof. Thank you so much for the excellent points that have been raised about telling us that the world does not owe us a living. It's our responsibility to determine how we want to live and how we get there. The need to have leadership, leadership that is committed, leadership that respects itself, leadership that's actually determined to bring about the change that we all desire, which in my view means that the leadership we have now, we need to do something about it. We need to cultivate something better than we have now. Otherwise, in another 30 years or in another 60 years, we are back at the same stage, complaining about the same situation. So we need to address leadership at all levels, not only at the level of politics and politicians. The question of institutions. We need to strengthen our institutions and not individuals, so that when you have a very strong institution, no matter how weak is the leader running it, the institution is able to resist manipulation. So the need to focus on institution, I think, has been raised. Also, the need for visioning. And now, I think the understanding is not just putting documents or writing some stuff on paper, but we need to have orientation among ourselves, where we have a common view of our country and how we get there, a common understanding of the kind of country that we want, from the east, from the south, from the west, from everywhere, agreeing on getting there. Because if you have another vision, 2050, the question is the level of consultation that gets there. We saw that in the vision 2020. So the need to have a society that has a clear vision on how to proceed. There was the question of, hello?
We're with you.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, the question of consensus on the kind of country that we run, as Dr. Sam, pointed out, the kind of contradictions that we have in our current arrangement, that we need to resolve some of them, so that we can have a nation that represents the people in that country. There was a question also, or the concern expressed, around the kind of conspiracy by elite. People who don't feel they belong to Nigeria, but they want to take everything that is in Nigeria and taking it outside. That if there is a commitment to one Nigeria, I think we will have a greater Nigeria that we have right now. So then, Ambassador Adiza, the point on mobilizing between now and the next election, because for her, it's kind of, we need to start now. Not just talking about, we need to start now. We need to mobilize. That the poverty we have does not have religion, does not have color, does not have ethnicity. If you are hungry in the north, you are hungry in the south, you are hungry in the west, you are poor, it is the same. So the need to start now to mobilize for the kind of country that you want, beyond ethnicity, beyond religion, beyond regionalism, should start like yesterday. I think these are serious points that have been made. And very importantly, the need for Nigeria to take its central place in the role they play on the continent. Yes, it's good to begin to talk of Nigeria first, but we can't have Nigeria that is strong and then environment and neighbors that are so weak. They will impact on what we do. So we cannot forget that other countries exist and focus on Nigeria first. Put our hands together, and then definitely we can have a great country and a great continent. I can see that the Vice President is back on the platform, so maybe I will now allow her to close. So that's just a quick summary I will provide. I'm sure that she has something much better to add. Sorry, Vice President, I had to step in when your network was having problems. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for rescuing me. And my sincere apologies, please. My network is something else. I think the President has said almost everything that has been discussed. I just want to sincerely appreciate all the discussants and the keynote addresser. You really spoke very well, and please permit me to be gender biased. Ambassador Hadiza spoke passionately as a mother. And really appreciate all of you. That is not to say that other people didn't really talk well, but you've really spoken very well. And I think if Abike Dabiri is here, she will have a lot of information, or a lot of points that she will pass back home. And on behalf of the NICE executive, my president, and the organizing committee, I would like to sincerely appreciate all of you for taking your time to discuss even passionately about our country, Nigeria. And I also want to appreciate, Miriam Bukar, for that wonderful, poet she gave to us. And to all those who have participated in this webinar to celebrate Nigeria at 60. We sincerely appreciate you, and we look forward to our country becoming a superpower of Africa and then the world at large. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Madam Mwakpa, for your kind thanks. Thank you very much. I mean, to everyone who's participated in this, thank you very much, very especially to all those who have been thanked. But then I would have Mr. Ojelo Zonia for joining us from far away Kyrgyzstan. We really appreciate it. All our other colleagues who have joined. I also saw Madam, I can't remember her name now, but she is a board member of DEVEX. She was with us all through the conversation. And everyone, totally, this has been a very beautiful one. Thank you very much. My name is Ibrahim Sanusi. I am the Public Relations Officer of the Nigerian community in Ethiopia. And it's been a huge honor for me personally to moderate this session. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And of course, the year-long celebration of the 60th anniversary. Bye for now. If you don't mind, if you can put up your videos so that we can take a group picture, we would appreciate that. Please put on your videos, It's just for a few minutes. We'll do that very quickly. Thank you. The videos are coming on. Thank you. Put it on. Thank you so very much, everyone. We really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to have you join us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and have a good weekend. Cheers.
Thank you, Ibrahim. A wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Great day. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence and your contributions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Goodbye. See you soon.
Bye.
Yes, like we announced, there will be a summary in kind of a policy brief that will be shared. The videos would also be posted publicly and will be shared publicly. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. All of this will be made available. Taufik Yakubu, yes, all of this will be provided.
Thank you, NICE, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Prof. Mr. Alimi, thank you. Mr. Egwim, thank you. Madam Omolola, thank you very much. Mr. Sunday Babatunde, thank you very much for your participation. We appreciate it. Madam Chiwe.
All the way from South
Sudan. Madam Elizabeth.
All the way from South Sudan.
Ibrahim, let me quickly observe that many participants did not put on their face mask. You don't have face masks.
We take notes. This will be
take note of that. Yeah, next time come with your face mask.
Madam Chile, thank you. Nenye Wenvo, good to see you. Thank you for joining. Dr. Akon, Dr. Rooks, thank you. Alimatu Al-Mustafa, thank you very much. Dr. Adetiran, thank you. You and Madam, we saw you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Clement Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you for thanking us.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.